this regular meeting of Littleton City Council order on September 19th, 2023. City Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Schlachter,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ryden,
Here.
Councilmember Barr,
Here.
Councilmember Grove,
Here.
Councilmember Driscoll, Councilmember Milliman, Councilmember Valdez.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Yeah, one of those. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next item up is the approval of the agenda. Council's had a chance to review the agenda. Anyone have any changes? Seeing no changes, the agenda is approved without objection. Item 4 is time for comments and reports. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
No reports tonight, thanks, Mayor.
City attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick update for our city council. Yesterday, I was in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals as the court there was hearing argument on the Sanchez v. Littleton case. That was a officer-involved shooting that occurred probably about 4 years ago. So that case is still going on, and it went pretty well. And so I expect to get a ruling back on that probably in the next 60 to 90 days based upon their current schedule. So that's my only report. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I want to start over Councilmember Barr.
No comment.
No comment. Councilmember Grove.
I have a few things. On Saturday, I attended a ribbon cutting for a new business in South Park called Bad Boy Boards. And what they do is they have beautiful wooden cutting boards, various sizes, and they're all out there. And they can also custom make them, and also those big blocks that you can put in the middle of your kitchen, as well as chessboards. So they have a shop behind and then a retail store in front. So that was very interesting. I also attended a business after hours put in by our own Littleton Chamber. And that was over across from the county building. And it was sponsored by a variety of different businesses in that little shopping center across the street from the county building, a little bit north here. And it was Pequino's Wood Oven Pizza, Los Portales American Restaurant, and La Rola Colombian Restaurant. So those were 3 restaurants, and they were wonderful, and you could sit outside there at the Wood Oven Pizza place and enjoy yourself. So I highly encourage you to go to those restaurants when you have a chance. As you know, we had the bigger Sister City delegation come here late in August, and I have been involved with the Sister City organization, and I was able to go to Biga last fall. And as part of that, we exchanged gifts. Well, their gift did not arrive in time for our civic dinner, so they sent it along with me. And what it is a beautiful book about their fire. They had a big fire that lasted from the fall of 2019 into 2020. And it was a very devastating fire. And this talks about how the community came together. And we were there, we went to visit an egg farm who lost a lot of their chickens as a result of the fire. And the Sister City program here in Littleton raised money and actually gave it to these farmers that helped replace their chickens so they could continue in business. And they had a very heartfelt response and thanked us quite a bit. Some of that, also that same amount of money, a portion of that money went to a small community near Biga, and they had a community get-together after COVID, and they talked about how it was the first time that their community was able to get together. And when we were there in October, it was only 3 to 4 weeks since they had not had a mask mandate. So that it lasted quite a long time there in Australia. So this book will probably go into the exhibit. If you haven't seen it, there's an exhibit about the Sister City program right outside the doors here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, North Littleton Promise. They work with immigrant families here in Littleton. They had their open house. They now have space in the East Community Center. They had their launch earlier this week, and they also, or pardon me, last week, and they have their fiesta on the 29th, and that is at South Fellowship Church from 6 to 8 p.m. And in addition, there was some chalk art that some of our merchants in the downtown launched, and it was so fun, super creative. They awarded prizes, had some different categories. You could see the folks actually making the art on the sidewalk, and it was just a really fun experience to be downtown. I was down there with a friend and my niece, and we just were in awe at the wonderful event that was created. So thanks to those folks, those merchants down there. That's all.
Great. Councilmember Valdez?
Thank you, Mayor. The only item I want to bring up is that I want people to remind them to be courteous and thoughtful when parking their cars, especially around restaurants, and in particular Cherry Cricket. Many of the folks that live over that way are experiencing people that are blocking their driveways, either part way or almost half of it. So if you will, while you're over there, please be courteous and be mindful of those folks, and share that information for folks that are going there. It's becoming a big problem for some of the folks over there. In fact, one of the neighbors has as a trophy on their patio a bumper that was ripped off of another car that had been parked in that area. So if you will, please be mindful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Milliman?
I want to apologize for missing the meeting last week. I'd like to thank my dogs for giving me that opportunity to miss the meeting last week. It was probably one of the ones I wanted to attend out of the 4 years that I've been on council. I'm so proud of South Metro Housing Options and all the hard work that they've accomplished over the last 4 or 5 years. And hopefully council really got a good idea about what they've been up to, what they're doing, what their challenges are, and what the future holds for affordable housing here in Littleton. Thanks.
Councilmember Driscoll?
Yes, thank you. On August 26th, I attended the Downtown Development Authority meeting, and we had a presentation by a company that the authority had hired, and they're going to be cleaning downtown every 6 weeks. So I'm hoping everybody kind of felt the difference. That was done on August 26th. They not only power washed the streets, but they took a lot of the graffiti down and stickers, and they spent about 36 hours with about 8 people just cleaning. They're going to continue to do this every 6 weeks, as I mentioned. So that's just some of the money that the DDA is using to better the district. And then also went to a ribbon cutting on September 6th for the Littleton Hospital. They had their new cardio and vascular center, about 97,000 square feet. And I know some of you guys were there, and just really excited that that's finally underway, and we're going to have a real gem in our backyard. So no reason to go all the way over to Anschutz. When that's done, might as well just stay right in your backyard. Thanks.
Thanks. I echo those sentiments with the Littleton, the Advent Health Hospital there. It was great groundbreaking there, and they've got quite the plans for making that facility a true regional center in healthcare here. So it's going to really add some to the city here. So that's all I have as far as reports. So I am going to go next up into the agendas. Item 5 is scheduled appearances. We have none. Item 6, proclamations. We have none. And item 7 is public comment. Public comment is a time for the public to come down and express opinions regarding issues that are not part of tonight's public hearings on tonight's agenda. Separate opportunity will be provided. We don't have any public hearings with that, but disrespectful, disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. City Council is not authorized under open meeting laws to discuss, comment, take action at this meeting on an issue raised by public comment that is not part of tonight's agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. When you approach 3 minutes, I will let you know you've reached your time. We do have a lengthy amount of people signed up. If you are here to speak to the general business item on Geneva Village, now would be the time, as it is not a public hearing item. So if you are here for Geneva Village, this time would be the time to come out. I will go through the list of people that signed up first and then give an opportunity for anyone else that wishes to speak to come up. First up, Dan Mullen.
Dan Mullen, District 1. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Yeah, I want to talk about Geneva Village. I've discussed Geneva Village over the years with the different council members, and certainly my perception of what was going on. And a number of years ago, before the last election, my perception was, and I voiced that, was that we were turning a blind eye on the project over, on our housing over there. And at that point, we had 7 empty apartments. My feeling was we were going to let it keep going until whether it was going to be a retrofit or fixing them up was going to be unsustainable because there'd be too many. Now there's 12. So my question to council, and I'd like you to answer that like I'm a 5-year-old. How does property that is 100 yards away from where you're sitting end up looking like it looks right now? As I walked through that project today, or that area, there's there's a pretty large area where the grass was all the way dead. Talking to a resident, because the irrigation system in that part of the village is not working, which probably accounts for the dead trees on the property, of which we have over half a dozen, which actually violates city code on having those dead trees. My frustration is now we have waited, and now the estimate is at over $5 million. That was my fear why we weren't remodeling those units one at a time when they came empty. And now we get a huge bill. And I'm an open-minded guy. What is going to be the business plan going forward? And maybe we're there now, but realizing $5.1 million is a lot of money. And I believe we're there because of our lack of commitment to that area. And this certainly isn't a shot at our wonderful city employees. They work under your guidance. And what I'm asking for is your guidance to not, I mean, we're being, you know, in your neighborhood, do you have any houses that have become neglected? The owner just doesn't seem to care, not through injury or illness. And what do you think about that? It's, they're bad neighbors, and that's how I feel the city is, and I'm part owner of this. We're being bad neighbors by letting that look like that.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. That's
Thank you
3
very
minutes.
much, council.
And I did misspeak earlier. We do have one item on second reading, ordinance on second reading of the ordinance 19. So if you're here for that, then would be the time to speak to that. Next up, let's see, this is, looks like it's Patrick McCall.
Yes. And I would like to speak towards the Geneva Village also, as well as the mineral second reading.
If you save the comments for that to the public comment period during that ordinance reading.
So save that, the ordinance, the mineral ordinance for during
Correct.
that reading? Okay, then I'll go into the Geneva Village. My name is Pat McCall, resident and homeowner in Southbridge Townhomes, coming up on 30 years. Please, I ask the council should restore Geneva Village for the next 50 years. Anyone that has spent any time in Geneva Village can feel the quietness, the escape from the city. That comes from the original architecture of the land use and the buildings. The architecture is international style of mid-century modern by Steinberg, of only 6 left in Littleton. Littleton has already received national recognition. This design gives the property a symbiotic relationship with the buildings, the park, and the lake, an openness and a quietness that would be lost with redevelopment. I do want to thank the city for putting a historic preservation position in place with the city staff. I think this could be very helpful. Geneva Village is a community-defining town square and public park. This property and its adjacent properties with Littleton City buildings and adjacent Arapahoe County Courthouse make up Littleton's campus like a town square. Geneva Village is a gateway entry to historic downtown from Santa Fe that defines our values, public open space, housing, and history. Geneva Village strengthens our city's story, preserved alongside historic Geneva Lodge, the park, the lake, and village is highly qualified. It's on all expert-recommended future preservation options. Senior housing option that South Metro Housing cannot offer and only the city can provide. Plus, the city should retain the property asset in the bank for the city's fiscal strength for the next 50 years. A legacy that strengthens our credit and provides a reserve option for our next generations, for just in case. This is how previous leadership nurtured the city. I believe no real estate professional would advise the city to sell the property or redevelop for multi-floor housing if they are considering the future value of historic residential and commercial real estate in downtown Littleton or throughout the rest of the city. This is the only
Mr. McCall.
downtown Littleton park.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. That's your 3 minutes. Next up is Cal Murab.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Cal Murab. I came to Littleton, an immigrant from Lebanon in early 1980. Started a business in downtown Littleton later that year. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. For the better part of 20-plus years, I've been advocating for higher density residential in the community. I'm here to speak in support of Geneva Village redevelopment plan, specifically as it relates to high-density housing options that are desperately needed within the city boundary and close proximity to Main Street. By developing Geneva Village, you will be allowing for both affordable and higher housing options. Doing so, you are offering a lifeline to all Littleton businesses, particularly to Main Street. Main Street, as we know it, thrives on the weekends, but in reality, that is not enough. Main reason Main Street businesses need the high density is to help downtown thrive, not only on Fridays and Saturday, but all through the week. My tenants, as well as other businesses, are struggling due to increased cost of goods and high inflation, particularly property taxes issue, which has increased significantly through the years. An example, one of my properties back in 2000, the taxes on it was $816. This year is $10,018 annually. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murab. Next up is Pat Donahue.
Good evening, Council. As the co-president and the representative of the Littleton Business Chamber, I would encourage you to consider whether or not you are good landlords and whether it does make good sense to continue further with Geneva Village. And my thoughts are trusting city leadership with their recommendations, your recommendations, and going forward with that. As far as the business chamber goes, we would be bad landlords, and we recognize that. We think we're way better at doing good business things, so we recommend we stay where our strength and where our expertise is, and we suggest you do the same, that Geneva Village does need to change. With all due respect to the people that live there and to this community, which I have heart for, it is time to make some tough decisions on that. So I wish everybody in the room luck on this.
Thank you, Mr. Donahue. Next up is Jerry Palmer.
Good evening to the council and to Mayor Slexer. Thank you for this open forum to give some positive suggestions to the city of Littleton. In current need for housing, Geneva Village comes to mind. Geneva Village was built in 1964 and is still in very good condition. There are homes in Denver built in the mid to late 1800s that are still viable. The architect knew what he was doing. Eugene Steinberg used the best material and the best construction practices that were available at the time. The city of Littleton owns the property, and as I understand free and clear, it'd be a turnkey property and can be used to borrow for other projects in the future. I think Geneva Village is viable for another 100 years. How about reviewing it 100 years from now? I do not think you want this project in your backyard, and what an impact it would be on the people living here, walking their dogs, exercising, bicycling, etc., and the excess congestion with traffic. One of the main reasons that Geneva Village needs to be preserved is for seniors who still are active and who do not qualify for disability, low income, background issues, or no family support left to help them. Also, Geneva Village really needs to be recognized submitted as a historic site and a great example of postmodern architecture with a very famous architect, Eugene Sternberg. It's right in your backyard. I'm not against new construction. Construction, in order to get finance, contractors, in order to get finance, have regulations such as disability, low income, which these seniors don't qualify for. Geneva Village units could be designated as separate units, maybe as condos, to get around some of these regulations. They could still be rented. They do not have to be sold. I understand the city council would like to make money, but sometimes things are more important than money. I think Geneva Village is one of those historic, aesthetic sites that needs to be saved. There are other places in Littleton area to build, develop, and design. And I suggest in the future meetings, someone would be willing to make a motion to keep Geneva Village, and someone would be willing to second that motion. And I thank Kyle Schlechter and all of the city council for this time to speak on behalf of Geneva Village. I sincerely thank all of you.
Thank you. That was a well-timed speech there, exactly 3 minutes. Next up, Emily Dykes.
Hi, y'all. It's good to see you. I'm here to talk about Geneva Village also. And I want to start by saying I get the tension that we're all straddling here. There's a lot of value in this land. There is value because people call it home, and there is value because it's got a lot of potential, and there's a lot we could do with it in our city. So I want to honor that tension, and I want to, not allow that to keep us from moving forward, because I think if we're able to use this land and to develop it in ways that include affordable housing, that allow people to have good access to all the public transportation that we have, wouldn't it be great to extend the beautiful downtown Main Street onto maybe Prince? Could we bring more? Could it not be like a giant oasis between, Main Street and where Lamar's is, the donuts? Could we have some businesses in there? Could we have some restaurants in there? Could we, kind of like what we're doing with Littleton Boulevard? I'm so excited about that. Anyway, so I want to support y'all as you've been moving forward with looking at redeveloping. You have our support. There's a lot of us who really support this, and I want to say thank you. And yeah, that's all. Okay.
Thank you. Next up, Paul Bingham.
Good evening, Council. I'm Paul Bingham, 236 West Delaware Circle. I'd like to also talk about Geneva Village. My ask of you is that you vote to rehabilitate. I think that was one of the two things that the staff came up with. Rehabilitate and improve Geneva Village tonight. Why would I ask you that? Well, this is more than just about Geneva Village. It involves our Littleton Town Square. Town Square was mentioned before already tonight. Geneva Village is a small part of the much larger parcel of land that is our town square, containing our city hall, where we are, police and fire station, Geneva Lodge, that now contains city offices, keys. Having a developer buy the Geneva Village property within the town square and build some housing or commercial property would simply destroy our town square. Littleton needs to retain ownership of this land. In the distant future, Littleton will need this land to expand onto. In 1976, Littleton government expanded from Main Street onto this Geneva Village property that it had wisely purchased. It expanded and built the city hall we're sitting in. Later, it has expanded into the Geneva Village, not too long ago. In future years, our city government will need this land to expand onto. Geneva Village is a fine placeholder, providing 28 or more units of affordable housing until Littleton's government needs that land to expand onto many years from now. This, I believe, is an overriding factor in how architecturally significant, pleasant, open, etc., that the village is on its own. Please, whatever you do, don't sell this land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. Next up, we have Mary Hanson.
Hi, City Council. My name's Mary Hanson. I live at Geneva Village. A lot of us older people are too shy to speak in front of people. I'm one of them, but I can read, so bear with me. I'm asking the City Council to please help keep Littleton and the historical community in place, and also help put back historical Geneva Village. It is our forever home. We do our best, the ones that can, to keep our community clean of trash, large trees, limbs that fall, we break them down, and also pull weeds. We have such beauty to look at and animal life to watch. Just think, when people pass all of Littleton community, they see the clean, calm, and beautiful life we have here in Littleton. Help save Geneva Village. We have had a couple of places inspected for our vouchers and passed with flying colors. So inside our places are clean and not trashy. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Next up is Mark Testerek, and following him is John Marchetti.
Figured when you couldn't pronounce it, it must be me. Good evening. My name is Mark Testro, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. My mom is a resident of Geneva Village, has been there since 2005. Geneva Village has been an extreme blessing to our family. She's been able to live on her own and live well there. And I ask you, I rise tonight to ask you to not redevelop it, not to sell it, but to keep it and to continue and let's go forth in a good way with Geneva Village, and not what they've been doing for some while, for a couple reasons. One is the community. When my mom moved in there in 2005, she was that person who, she still drove, she was still very active, and she was going and she ran errands for everybody in that place. They all knew Barb within months of her moving in there because she was the one running errands for everybody. And a couple years ago, she came to me and she said, I just don't think I'm safe to drive anymore. I probably need to have you sell my car and give up my keys. And you know, as a son with an elderly parent, I was like, thank God I didn't have to have that conversation with her, you know, that she was wise enough to figure that out, understand that on her own. And I said, it's okay, Mom, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure it happens. I can count on one hand in the last couple of years the time she's called me to go get something for her, because her neighbors around her have paid that back to her in an amazing way. They are running errands for her all over if she needs something, she doesn't have to ask. They come to her and they're like, do you need anything? I'm going to the store, Barb, and they take care of her. It's a community that you're not going to be able to recreate, and it's a community that is pretty awesome that they have going there, and I think it's something to consider. We talk about all the logistics and everything of it, but I think that community is huge there, and I want to ask you to continue that community. But I also want to ask you to make a decision finally, because for the last several years, they've been under great stress there because somebody, I don't know whether it was city staff or who it was, just made this arbitrary decision to not move people back in there. And so for all these years, they've been sitting there going, oh God, what's happening? Wringing their hands, worried, nervous wrecks, because they don't know what's happening. This is their home. My mom's been there 18 years. It's the longest she's lived in one place in her life. And she's just like all the rest of them, wringing their hands, going, what is going to happen? And they made this unilateral decision not to refill the place, and that just has created the greatest angst amongst these residents there. And what they really feel like, and whether it's an accurate thing or not, what they feel like is that the city is just waiting for them to die so that they can redevelop the place. And that's a pretty sad place that the city has left these seniors at, that's how they feel. They shouldn't have to feel like we're just waiting for them to die so it can be redeveloped. But that's really where they've been left. For good or bad, whether that was the purpose or not, that's where they're at. Perception is reality, and that's been their perception. And I just ask you to make a decision, but I really would ask you to make the decision to keep the place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is John Marchetti, followed by Robin Bernstein.
Hello, my name is John Marchetti. I live in District 4. I want to talk a little bit about Geneva Village tonight. Everything points to historically preserving Geneva Village. Geneva Village is the north gateway to Town Square and downtown Littleton. Sternberg's projects throughout the city typically incorporated accessible, common green space, focusing on ambient lighting, creating an overall feeling of community. Geneva Village's 60-year-old architectural character and its community creating design is still intact and deserves renovation, not removal. If money is a concern for renovation, questions about loans of well over $500,000 made to the city from 2009 to 2013 by the Geneva Village Enterprise Fund continue to resurface, and that over $335,000 of those are still in arrears. The council received a more detailed email in January of this year. You may want to go back and review that. The former city manager stated they have no intention of repaying this money. What does the city have to say about this repayment? It could go a long way in renovating Geneva Village. Geneva Village improves Littleton's bond rating and serves as a bankable property for future use. Geneva Village has a lot going for it, and for that reason, Geneva Village needs to be saved and passed on to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Robin Bernstein, followed by Elizabeth K. Marchetti.
Namaste, Council. I am Robin Bernstein. I live at Geneva Village, and I want a world that works for all, not just me and my cats. Thank you, Be Connected, for your one-of-a-kind data that illuminates our very vulnerable position here. We are very physically and psychologically traumatized. Core Power, Becky, Nia at Lowell with Nia, Buck Center, and the Bemis Library have made me not Meshuggah. Brittany Catalinas is a smooth operator, smoothing over our anxious, overwhelmed, uneasy, traumatized souls to a safety net of security and a source of solace for our future. I know Brittany will smooth out my issue with SMHO, the bureaucracy, who screwed up my voucher from the very beginning. I still have nothing. My vision is to transform the minds and actions of beings in situations of society to preserve our world and Geneva Village for a more merciful future. And by the way, 2 inspections passed over there, flying colors. Council, you either have integrity or you don't. You know, I think targeting vulnerable senior women is cowardly, and we have been shocked enough, okay? With all of you, all over the years. What does the city value, by the way? Seniors, we will see. The Gateway, which reflects Eugene Sternberg's extraordinary architecture, we will see. Or will you settle for front-range mediocrity? We will see, city. But you know what? Nothing is accomplished without love. Okay, now I have my graphs that you all, sent out. You say development or gateway, 23% is a value. Mid-century modern heritage, 31%. Geneva Village right in there, you don't recognize that. Say Geneva Village for 50 years. Shared vision, 34%. Placemaking and neighborhood development, unique character. Geneva Village, one of a kind. How can you go wrong? No crime at Geneva Village. 60 or 56%. Don't make us unhoused over at Geneva Village, okay, you all? You know, I know when you see the homeless downtown, it's embarrassing because it's, affects your business, but they think I'm homeless with the backpack and the schlepping, Don't make us unhoused. No crime, by the way. You know what? We need your help. You're our public servants, okay? I have cats. They're my companions. Namaste.
Thank you. Next up, Elizabeth K. Marchetti, followed by Karen Talentire.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Elizabeth K. Marchetti. I live in District 2. I'm also the most recent appointee to the South Metro Housing Options Board. So I really appreciate this opportunity. As we all know, Geneva Village served an important purpose when it was first built by providing modest housing for retired service industry workers. Redeveloping this site could do that again and much more. This is an amazing opportunity. 2.8 acres in downtown is rare and could be home to so many more people and families than it is today. This seems like one of those moments where Littleton could really be a leader in the region, a place where young workers and families can actually start out. I worry about whether Littleton will be a place that my child can afford to settle in. As long as the housing supply is limited, housing prices will continue to go up. I also worry about the longevity of the award-winning Littleton Public School District as enrollments continue to decline. The fact that the city has permitted so very few new homes in the last decade means that this city remains a place where young people and families still can't start out and where the school district is being forced to consolidate elementary schools. Redeveloping this site would go a long way toward implementing the comprehensive plan's vision and values, as well as its housing and economic development goals. More housing being built at the Geneva Village site, with architecture that honors its history, would be a good start to a new trend of permitting homes. A thoughtful redevelopment of the site would be a great asset for Littleton for years to come. Please allow the redevelopment of Geneva Village. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Karen Talentire, followed by Mike Wright.
I'm not speaking about Geneva Village, but about how citizens can make sure that citizens are represented appropriately in decisions like this. So I wanted to make an interesting observation about election transparency. You, the council, actually have an electronic voting system that is wonderful and transparent. But the reason it is transparent might not be so obvious. When you press the button to vote, it goes into an electronic system, and you actually have no idea what all it does in there. For all you know, it also sends a laser signal to the moon. You can't prove it doesn't without examining the system. But what matters is that it sends a signal to the screen, showing which way you voted. And even if someone hacked into the system, that's not even a problem for that, because you can see whether or not there was tampering. The reason this voting system is transparent is not because it's on a screen, but because each of you can see how your vote was recorded, and you can check whether it correctly recorded your vote. If it was incorrect, you could say something right then and there. You were also able to see if the counting was correct, because you can count to 7 at a glance, so you can do your own check on the machine tabulation. This tabulation is transparent because there are only a few voters. If you had 70,000 counselors, it wouldn't be a very transparent system. There is actually a reason to use an electronic system, because it allows citizens to easily see your votes and to also check the count. I will say you could achieve the same effect by holding up big cards saying yes or no. And that system would cost maybe $5 if you really splurge. Or you could put stones in jars like the ancient Greeks. And you could handle 70,000 counselors that way, since we have an advantage over the Greeks of having transparent jars that are relatively cheap. But I'll admit the screen does have other uses. It shows nice pictures of Littleton, so there's that. So why are your votes transparent, but not the votes of the citizens who voted to put you in this position? Citizens in Littleton can't see how mail-in ballots got delivered to them or delivered back to the county. We can't see whether our electronic vote got counted or deleted. We have no way to know whether the tabulator read our ballot correctly. The electronic system is supposed to be auditable with a hand recount, but for some reason we don't get hand recounts these days, even when the law says to. No one who cares about truth and justice would be against free and fair elections. Grassroots voters in all parties want free and fair elections. This is one issue where you can stand with the majority and stand for right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mike Wright, followed by Dave Mitchell.
Hello, Council. My name's Mike Wright, District 2. It's nice to see you guys. I also have with me a member of the first fifth grade class at Little Raven, and it's her first city council meeting, so I'm pretty proud of her for coming. I am coming to join the masses and speak about Geneva Village. Council, I'm so grateful for the work that you guys have done. This city has taken some wonderful steps in recent years. The ULUC, all of the work that you've done. We are a thriving, safe, comfortable city. I also think Geneva Village is lovely and has been lovely for many years. I've had dear friends who have lived there, like Joan and Sherry and Dale, people who I've sat in their living rooms and enjoyed great conversation with them. However, I am joining the chorus calling for redevelopment of this place. I believe affordable housing is an incredible charge upon us. I have had too many people in my community, I'm a pastor of a local church here, too many people who are part of our church who have had to move away because they simply cannot afford to stay in Littleton. This is such a wonderful opportunity, and I think Littleton, I think you all are capable of doing this thoughtfully and in partnership with South Metro Housing. I really urge you to go in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Go Bolts. Dave Mitchell, and then Carol Smith.
Dave Mitchell, District 3, one of thousands living in District 3, and represented by several council members that are here tonight. How do I know they will represent me? Because we live in a country that has a representative government. It is our democratic system. When you ran for council, you did not know all of the issues that would be decided during your term, but you did know that you were to represent all of your constituents, not just those that voted for you. Please put aside what you wish for Geneva Village. Your wish is but one of thousands in your districts. Listen to those who have made their commitment to appear tonight, and then have your vote reflect their wishes, the wishes of those you represent. Geneva Village. Here we have an excellent example of passive-aggressive behavior for all to see. For example, the city has not taken care of the landscaping and has deferred other maintenance. During Mark Ralph's last few days, I sent to him a link with a psychologist's analysis of passive behavior that, to my mind, seemed to fit the city's approach to Geneva Village. Let me know if you would like to see that analysis. Geneva Village, please keep it, manage it well, and be proud that you belong to a city that believes in community and that has a representative government. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Carol Smith, followed by Pat Cronenberger. Is Carol Smith here?
Hi, Mayor, Councilman. I have lived at Geneva Village for almost 17 years. And when I moved in, it was in great taken care of on the outside. And then about 5 years ago, things started declining. The landscape and the trees and the weeds. And I don't know why Littleton did not take care of it. They've been known for having a tree city. I mean, to me, it's a disgrace to what it's been allowed to do. It is a very respectable community. I was introduced to Littleton about 30 years ago, and I thought that's where I want to live. And I moved here from Inglewood for that reason. But what I've seen in the last 5 years is very discouraging. I moved here in hopes that this would be my last move. It was like home. I was born in Geneva, New York, so this was really ironic. This is where the Lord has put me, and I ask Him to open all your hearts and not just the pocketbooks. And thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Pat Cronenberger, followed by Alexis Barrere.
Good evening, Council. Pat Cronenberger, District 2. I'd like to offer my strong support for the staff's recommendation to redevelop Geneva Village. The parameters of the staff recommendations, such as providing desperately needed housing, truly take into consideration the greater good of Littleton. As a former historic preservation professional and a former Littleton council member who consistently and substantively advocated for historic preservation, I have been dismayed on too many occasions when fellow citizens have weaponized historic preservation when they don't like a development. Despite a lot of chatter in our community, rarely do people speak up, at least to previous councils, when we've considered serious historic preservation policies or initiatives. In fact, we have been in the council chambers, and I can tell you that it was a lonely place when we were considering the first preservation ordinance, a proposed survey of the northeast neighborhoods for their historically and architecturally significant buildings, and passed the first version of the downtown historic district. These councils were a lonely place, and I know my dear friend Rebecca Cast can attest to that. Most important, you are to be commended for finally considering Geneva Village's next chapter. A course of redevelopment gives you an immense opportunity to serve multiple community goals, as articulated in our comprehensive plan. I know firsthand this is not an easy conversation. When I first learned 20 years ago that the apartments were being rented at such low rates, even for then, and that they were not needs-based, I was appalled. for the city to be in a position of landlord for this kind of situation. I proposed to fellow council members that we sell the buildings and redevelop the site, but there was very little support. Very difficult conversation. Tonight, I urge you to choose staff's thoughtful recommendation and set this site on a course that will serve our city by fulfilling multiple goals of the comp plan, to create more housing options, including affordable, create housing close to mobility options, especially for those who can't afford a personal auto or may not be able to drive, and to create housing that is near amenity-rich downtown and make our historic downtown even more vibrant and economically healthy. I urge you to support the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Alexis Barrere, followed by Maureen Whalen.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for your time and service, and please thank your family members, because I know you guys are here long hours and lots of other things, so I know it's a thankless job, so I appreciate it. I live in District 1, and I also grew up, born and raised in District 1, and had the privilege now to raise my family here. And I just want to come here and show my support for hopefully City Council moving forward for redeveloping Geneva Village, although I understand the hardship and the heartache that goes into that community now. I think there's a ability to recreate that community for current residents and for future residents. And as someone with kids in the LPS system, I am continually disheartened to hear of classmates of my daughters that have to relocate out of Littleton because they can no longer afford to live here, and how that changes her experience growing up here compared to how I grew up here. And how do we continue to allow this place to be a vibrant community that allows seniors to have a great place to live, young families, single people who want to be bartenders or bus drivers here. How do we kind of create this community? And I think Geneva Village is a unique opportunity for you all to do that. So I hope you move forward with redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Maureen Whalen, followed by Ifan Abshir.
Good evening. My name is Maureen Whalen. I live in District 1. I'm really impressed with my peers in this room, people on both sides. I think we're smart, capable, passionate people who love this city. I thank the council for their time. I thank everyone for coming in. I think we're smart and capable enough to do both things, to support the community that is still at Geneva Village and to redevelop. It breaks my heart to think of these 12 women sitting. A family member said, just waiting to die. I can only speak for myself, but that is the last way I want anyone to feel. I think we have the resources. I am grateful for the social work involvement. I think we can help so many people while still respecting how the architect originally intended to have open space, to have community, and to support so many people. Somewhat related, I'll ask one more time that we return to being able to call in to voice our comments at night. As a working parent of 3, I so appreciated being able to get to soccer practice, get dinner going, and speak from the comfort of my home. When I am able to be here, I am, but man, it would be so helpful if I could have that call in. Again, thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you. Next up, Ifan Abshir, and then the last person signed up is Pam Chadbourne.
Hello, Council. Good evening. Ifan Abshir, District 4. I want to start with my commitment, my firm commitment to affordable housing in Littleton. I have stated for years, as a candidate, as a member of a city committee, and as a resident of Littleton, that I believe housing is a human right, and I will take this opportunity to, on the record, state that I strongly urge Council to adopt an ordinance mandating affordable housing to be part of all future development within the city. That being said, I want to talk about 2 different aspects of Geneva Village that haven't really been discussed today, and why I'm here to plead, urge, ask, what have you, Council not to demolish Geneva Village through any redevelopment, and instead commit to preserving Geneva Village as a historic landmark and committing the funding to make necessary repairs and improvements to Geneva Village so it will continue to provide affordable housing for Littleton seniors for years to come. So first, I want to start by mentioning the importance of the shared open space in our communities, both for the physical and mental well-being of our residents, but also for the sustainable benefits of green space in a downtown developed urban zone. The 2.8-acre Geneva Village site in effect contributes to the overall green space provided to the city residents through the adjacent Geneva Park, as well as the city building itself. As the city continues pursuing future plans to create the Northern Gateway, it is important to preserve this borrowed community open space. Now I want to call this council's attention to your own comprehensive plan that was adopted in October of 2019. In Appendix 3, specifically on page 32, you discuss the use of borrowed space. According to the city's own definition, the concept of borrowed space refers to the idea that open space on certain properties can be borrowed by residents or occupants of adjoining properties. Borrowed space can be on both public and private properties, like Geneva Village. According to the comprehensive plan, the concept of borrowed space and its contribution to community character will be an important consideration during future land use planning discussions for the Envision Littleton process. I want City Council to remember what you committed to in your comprehensive plan when it comes to open space and borrowed space in this way. I also want to talk quickly about the EPA's community open green space and how it is socially valuable. Some of the values that the EPA has said, it's providing valuable surface and groundwater resources, improves neighborhood livability and connectivity, and also as adding urban green space and wildlife habitat. Secondly, I want to discuss the historic importance of Geneva Village, as many of my fellow residents here have talked about, but I want to make sure you all have read and really focused and discussed and mulled over the Historic Preservation Board's letter that is included in your packet. And finally, I want to talk about back to green space. Eugene G. Sturenberg was revolutionary in his time in Littleton in trying to create open space and this indoor-outdoor connection for our residents, which is so important. So again, I plead council to protect and preserve Geneva Village so that it will continue, it already does, but to continue to provide affordable housing for Littleton seniors. Please don't be a disgrace again.
Next up, Pam Chadbourne.
Good evening, Council. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I'm a block and a half from here, and I want to ask you to preserve Geneva Village. And I'm going to make a comment in response to some people who want to redevelop. This site is too small to solve any of the problems that those folks mentioned. Littleton is a huge city relative to Geneva Village, and there are many, many other parcels because of the ULUC that are going to come up for redevelopment year after year after year. South Metro Housing Options does not need this to develop. We saw in the study session last week that they actually have more parcels now than they can fit into their schedule for applying for LIHTC. I guarantee you they're going to acquire more property. They have full-time professionals working on that acquisition. They don't need Geneva Village to solve affordable housing or accomplish their plans in Littleton. But we do need Geneva Village, as Ifton mentioned and many others, as borrowed open space for the downtown. The rest of downtown is gentrifying and densifying, and it will continue to do so because that's what the ULUC demands, was intended to do. What we do need is our town center, our town square, our city park. And so that's what I've passed out, and I'd like people to know that this exists. Historically, in this 27 acres, we are kind of between the South Platte and the City Ditch, and we've got the first century of Littleton's history encapsulated in physical form on this property. We haven't expanded that because we haven't invested in historic preservation lately, but we know how historic preservation has paid off downtown. And I guarantee you that more than a hollow tube on the South Platte River, developing this origin story and the first century story on our town square will pay off for the next century. I want to say that the $5 million I don't buy into. Full rehabilitation is simply not true. I saw the report, AEI's report in 2016-17. The facility is in great shape. It doesn't need rehabilitation. when we homeowners are told, when we want to do something to our homes, we're told to get 3 bids and estimates from a contractor. We've got one and it's disastrous, and I don't believe it based on the 2016-17 findings. Council, the first thing you need to do as stewards for our property, this is our property, is ask staff to get more information about the state, the needs assessment, and what it would cost to fix. Now, I sent information about all the other asks. We need more information, so do you, to do your due diligence to make the right decision here. The right decision is to preserve Geneva Village. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the people that have signed up. Are there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? I'll start with Rebecca.
I did send a letter also. My name is Rebecca Cast, but I didn't see it in the packet, so I don't know if you got it. I emailed it to the city clerk last week. So you did get it?
We did. I did
Okay.
receive it, yeah.
Thank you. All right, can we start over at 3 minutes? I timed this pretty tight. All right, Rebecca Cast, 1940, West Arapahoe Road. I'm also a board member of Historic Littleton, Inc. Last week, I attended a meeting of historical preservation nonprofits from the South Metro area. This was people from Parker to Ken Carroll Ranch. And these other towns have like 1 or 2 historic buildings they're desperately trying to save, or maybe just ruins of a building. And they're using this to tell their community's history. And people like this tell me all the time how lucky we are in Littleton to have so many historic buildings that we have preserved. But it has taken a lot more than luck to preserve our history. It took the foresight of people like Ed Bemis and Bob McQuarrie of the Littleton Museum, and some of the individuals in this room like Pat and Rick Cronenberger, who worked for decades on preservation. And it also takes strong government involvement. And I commend those of you on the council who approved the Littleton Downtown Historic District 2 years ago. That was huge, and thank you so much for your votes. I also commend you for taking up this issue of Geneva Village. That was a hot potato that past city councils, including the ones that Pat and I served on, just passed off for decades. But in some ways, we are lucky that we ignored this issue for so long, because now the Geneva Villa homes, which were built in the 1960s, are old enough to be considered historic and worthy of preservation. So I'm not going to go into the history of Geneva Lodge and the village due to the time constraints, but these buildings in Geneva Village are modest. They're not like Town Hall or our courthouse, but they are worthy of landmark designation because they're representative of mid-century modern style buildings, and also they were designed by prominent Littleton architect Eugene Sturtenberg. But you tonight aren't deciding whether or not to landmark them. If you do decide to redevelop this site and tear them down, that tangible history will be gone forever. I urge you instead to stabilize the buildings, make it possible for the current tenants to continue living there while our community has a conversation about this entire site, which it's so unique in our downtown area and has so many assets. Please give our community more time to discuss Geneva Village, at the least land bank the property for the future rather than sell it to developers. And thank you for your time serving our community, and thank you for listening to all our ideas tonight.
Thank you. Who else would like to come and speak?
Hello, I'm Benjamin Traquair. I live at 8417 South Reed Street. I am in favor of the redevelopment of Geneva Village. 40-some years ago, Littleton built something great, and it served the town for many years. It was a great example of the design and building that could be done at the time. And for all those years, it served the city, thousands of people, and then it stopped serving the city. I'm referring to the culvert under Jackass Hill. Eventually, it no longer served its original purpose and needed to be replaced. And we didn't all get together and hoo and ha over whether or not this historic culvert needed to be replaced. Instead, the folks in charge identified that there was a desperate need for the replacement of this infrastructure. We saw the value in replacing it with something newer that could handle modern times and the future, and they just went ahead and did it. And obviously, the Geneva Village is culturally and emotionally and socially much more important than a culvert. However, the need to address what the city really needs is the same. And I would ask that you consider the current and future needs of the city and redevelop Geneva Village. Thank you.
Thank you. See anybody else?
Mayor, council, staff, nice to see you all. Patrick Santana, District 1 now. Some thoughts on tradition and history here. I'm not going to address all the thorny details of exactly what to do, but I do think about this site and want to take you back to the larger history of this place. And originally, at the turn of the century, it was open land, and then it became the Dowling Farm around the turn of the century. And the reason it was turned into a farm is because of the needs of the day were for food production, like agriculture and crops. That was a common move. In 1920, Mr. Stuart Street bought the property, and it became known as the Romoco Poultry Farm. The Street family built a new residence there and added several chicken houses to house their 2,000 chickens. Thus, an older existing farm was transformed to meet the needs of 1920s Littleton as a city and a region. Nobody protested this change. No one insisted the old Dowling farmhouse be preserved because adapting land to the needs of the day was a time-honored practice here. By the 1920s, a rising need for tuberculosis care led to the Geneva Association to acquire the Romoco farm. Its chicken houses were demolished. Tuberculosis patients moved into the suites modified farmhouse, now called Geneva Lodge. In the 30s, brick walls and a gate were added. In the 40s, a new wing and solarium was tacked on. Nobody objected to these changes because adapting land to the needs of the time was how Littleton people, historically and traditionally, met the challenges of their day. A decade later, medicine reduced the need for tuberculosis care, so by the 60s, the needs of the day had changed again. Less convalescents, more retirement homes. Thus, the Geneva Association added 28 new residences, which we call Geneva Village today. Again, big changes were made to the property. These changes were embraced because historically, Littleton people do that. They adapt and change to meet the needs of their time. I ask this council to humbly step into the same tradition, really, allowing Littleton land to change and meet the needs of our time. I ask you to consider the real need for homes today. We see it in the headlines of our local paper. I just caution you against being sidetracked by aesthetic or abstract concerns such as town center or mid-century modern. Real needs can be addressed here by your decision. And I think that's the way our forebears handled these questions. And with humility, I think we should do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would wish to speak? Stu?
Good evening, Council. Stuart Maher, 5645 South Crocker Street, Capitol Heights neighborhood, District 2. Having followed the adventures and misadventures of Geneva Village over 40 years of civic involvement, I appreciate and thank you for your comprehensive, diligent, extensive engagement over the last several months to finally frame the question, what are we to do with Geneva Village? And I want to recognize your, dare I say, compassionate attention to the collateral question, what about the dozen or so remaining residents, for whose plight we all share some responsibility for years of avoiding to engage the realities impacting this critical city asset. The extensive research, detailed reports, and perspectives you, our city staff, relevant citizen boards, commissions, authorities, contracted specialists have critically synthesized to two policy options: rehabilitate and preserve existing housing, or redevelop the property. These two clearly support and frame the questions. What are we to do? What about the plight of the remaining citizens? I urge you to support the staff recommendation before you this evening. It effectively addresses the plight and needs of the remaining residents. It provides a clear and doable vision and mission for you to direct city staff and related citizen support boards and commissions to engage in the revitalization not only of Geneva Village, but also the creation of a major gateway and entry to our community. It is an opportunity to honor the historic and urgent vision of available, accessible, affordable public and private housing options. Redevelopment is the responsible use of the far too long languishing Geneva Village asset. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Just go ahead and get in line and we'll call you all up as we do that.
Do I have to push? Okay. My name is Philip McCart. I'm in District 3. I recently moved back to Littleton. I have a 7-month-old baby girl, and she has been inspiration to me to be a lot more involved in local politics and local issues. And in my personal case, I have a job I'm very happy with. I'm an aerospace engineer, and as a single-income family in Littleton, it's not easy. It's very difficult to think about the future with what my baby girl will grow up into, and preschool, probably not going to happen. Just going to be blunt right now. I'm very happy that Littleton Public Schools is here, and I want to do everything I can to encourage the tax base to remain healthy in Littleton, such that Littleton Public Schools can remain all it seems to be. At least I'm not there yet. She's only 7 months old. So anything that I can encourage you to do to increase what I consider to be a very, 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 very big problem is housing costs. And it's Geneva Village is 2.8 acres, I believe, which is a lot of land. It's been a great home to a lot of people for a while now, but it could be a great home to many more people. And, I spent the entire day with my family at the Center for Colorado History, as well as the Colorado History for Women. And it kind of helped me frame my mindset for this meeting. And I'm really, I'm kind of new to the region, but when something makes it into a history museum, it seems to tell a story about our people or our societies or the region that it's in. And while Geneva Village seems to have a very good story, part of that story seems to be, from my limited understanding, is that Eugene Sternberg very much valued affordable housing. And even for people who have good jobs, it's not affordable in Littleton. So anything we can do to take a chip away at our huge housing deficit through several decades of non-development, I urge you to do, and I urge you to accept the staff's recommendation and redevelop Geneva Village. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up in line.
Rick Cronenberger, District 2. Good evening, Mayor Schechter and the City Council. I've been shaping historic preservation in Littleton for the past 40 years with numerous studies, planning activities, surveys, writing ordinances, reviewing the ULC, the comprehensive plan, creating historic districts, historic landmarks, et cetera, et cetera. I enjoyed being on Historic Preservation Board for my second time, serving as the chair, which has resulted in me spending a total of 9 years on the board, spanning a 26-year period. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve on this board. I will continue to promote and preserve the historic resources of Littleton, those known and unknown, particularly the mid-century modern architecture of Littleton Boulevard and throughout the city. The Geneva Village redevelopment can create a great opportunity to move Littleton forward and for increased preservation of our historic buildings. With creative planning and a desire for great architecture, Geneva Village offers opportunities to strengthen the north entrance to the city and to improve the city center complex and provide more sustainable and affordable housing. There are several key elements of Geneva Village's design and Sternberg's architectural philosophy that, if retained, can preserve the original design concept and increase the promotion of Sternberg, which included him serving on the Littleton Planning Commission. I don't know how many people know that. The possibilities of preservation are preserving 2 or 3 buildings, the clock tower, the common central space, and most significantly, the very strong west to east visual access entrance across the site through Geneva Lodge to the city building. That was an intentional design detail that Sternberg did. Taking this approach could result in the creation of a Geneva Lodge, Geneva Village Historic District that includes both the landmark Geneva Lodge and portions of Geneva Village, and enhanced interpretation of the Craftsman-style lodge along with the mid-century modern design elements and Sternberg's legacy in Littleton. I just want to mention that the town square concept has been mentioned several times tonight and recently. There is no historic significance for this concept applying to Geneva Village or the city center, and it seems to have been created as an argument against development. Let's strive for continued powerful architectural design and planning ideas that Sternberg applied to his Littleton and regional projects. I support the general redevelopment approach recommended by the city staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up.
My name is Spencer Hanks. I live a lovely 1 block away, so it was a delightful walkover. I sympathize deeply with the ethos behind historical preservation. Littleton is a town that is full of really rich places, rich architecture, and rich buildings. And even in my time here, I've fallen in love with all sorts of places. And there are fights that need to be had. And when the time comes, I'm happy to line up with these people in order to fight that fight. But that's not the issue of the day. The reality of our world is that change comes very fast. And looking to cast this city in amber does not mean that change is not going to happen. It just means that the change that comes, we know exactly how that plays out. It becomes, that change looks like a gated community with gilded walls. It looks like a place with median home prices of $2 million. To hammer that point home, on my walk here, there's a 2-bedroom townhome listed half a block away for $1.2 million. I don't know how many people in this room can afford it, but I certainly cannot. With that, I do firmly stand my support behind the redevelopment plan issued by the staff for Geneva Village. While the future is scary, looking forward, I would much rather have this place be able to be open and enjoyed by residents and business owners and the people that actually live here, rather than Airbnb guests, day trippers, or a bedroom community to high finance and the other salaries commensurate to what those kind of housing values are going to afford here in Littleton. That's a tough path, and that's a tough decision. And I throw my support back to the Historical Preservation Society that these types of redevelopment efforts don't have to mean 5-, 6-story condos, soulless new builds. I'd really like to say that when the time comes and these redevelopment efforts are pushed forward for the historical preservation to stand alongside and make sure that these are done with care and sympathy so that the soul of Littleton isn't just encapsulated in these buildings, that we can keep with the tenor of the times, but preserve the soul of Littleton within a community that is now available and ready to enjoy that space. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to come and speak? Seeing no one, I want to thank everyone for coming down and speaking tonight. We are going to take a kind of a little detour here and do some other business. Next up on our agenda, we're going to have consent agenda, but I'm going to see if the city manager or city attorney have anything they want to add for anything there.
Mayor, I think we'll be able to address most comments in the presentations.
Great. All right, so item 8 is consent agenda. Consent agenda items may be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Consent agenda item A, ordinance 2023, an ordinance on first reading approving amendments to Title 10, known as the Unified Land Use Code, the Littleton City Code, and to the zoning map. B, Resolution 103 of 2023, approving the supplemental agreement number 2 with the Secretary of the Army for continued access at South Platte Park. And C, ID 23228, motion to approve the minutes of the September 5th, 2023 regular meeting of City Council.
Mayor, I move to approve consent agenda items A, B, C.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda items? Seeing none, I'm going to open the vote.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Next up, general business. Now back to the excitement that everyone's here for. We have one item on general business tonight, ID 23154. Sure, we have a request for a 5-minute recess here. Okay.
She said 2.
we are back. Next item for business is general business, ID 23154, Geneva Village. So what we have here is staff is going to have a kind of a presentation, kind of summarize where things are, and then council, we can ask some questions if there's any kind of comments on kind of some initial thoughts where you have, because we don't have, there's not a resolution or ordinance, we don't have anything set that we're actually approving or not approving, so have kind of this idea is to form a motion. I think their staff has presented a couple suggestions, and then after there's a motion, we can have more thorough discussion on that particular motion. So I'm going to turn it over to the city manager to lead the presentation here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of council. Our assistant city manager, Kathleen Osher, who has driven much of this work in the last few months, had an unavoidable absence from this meeting tonight, so I'm called in to present the main part of the presentation. I'm assisted in that by Keith Reister, our Public Works and Utilities Director, who has several years now of experience and knowledge with the Geneva Village community and the facilities there and some of those challenges. And I'm also joined by Brittany Catalinas, the CEO of Be Connected, who's working closely with the city. The city has engaged to help with the Geneva Village community in terms of housing options, because we know that whether the council gives direction for rehabilitating the property or redeveloping the property, there's going to be some housing instability, at least temporarily, and Brittany's firm, and Brittany has been instrumental, I think, in helping us to understand that the community there and what their needs are as the city makes this decision. So, as we've all heard and as we all know, Geneva Village has been a fixture within downtown Littleton for almost 60 years now, and is now facing the issues that many 60-year-old facilities are facing. It's in some disrepair. It's not chronic disrepair, because many of the units are in really fine shape, and the residents have done a lot to maintain the community in partnership with the city. But it is facing, as you'll hear tonight from Mr. Reister, facing the same kind of structural issues, whether it's electrical and plumbing and lots of various structural issues that have some complexities in how they can be addressed. And much of that is compounded by challenges of asbestos mitigation and things that make repair much more expensive. So that is an option for the city to go down that path, but the city council has been interested and engaged now for several years, I know, in determining the best path forward in how the city can use that site, that property, its proximity to downtown and the Littleton Center. What is the best use for the next 60 years? And when council's had, I believe, 3 or 4 different study sessions learning and contemplating this issue over the last couple of years, and is grappling with, as you think about what's best in the best interest of the city, issues ranging from historic significance to financial responsibility with city resources, to the opportunities to meet many of the community's current critical challenges, like housing and integration with the vision taking shape for downtown. I think most of all, and first and foremost, the council has been clear that the welfare and of the community who lives there, the residents there, are of paramount importance, and our ability to address resident needs is at the top of our list. And I think that has been part, and you'll see that has been part of the way that city works, and the way that certainly I think we all plan to work in the future as we do move to the next future for Geneva Village. So tonight, We do have a summary presentation. I think you'll recognize many of the topics and slides that we have. We wanted to provide that summary for you and for the public, certainly, and, allow for foster community input tonight, as we've heard. And then council will be asking you tonight for your direction generally on which direction is best for the long-term future of the city. Do you want us to start down the path of rehabilitating that community? And as you'll hear from Mr. Reister, it's not urgent. The costs that you'll hear are all costs that will be incurred over time, and so, we would start that process. We would start that process of rehabilitating the property as efficiently and effectively and with as much empathy as we can for the current residents. Or alternatively, would council like to see us start the process of planning for redevelopment of that property for the next 60 years? That values the history that we've had, but does look to meet those challenges of the future. I know I've heard many questions about why aren't you talking about more detail in terms of variations on how the property could be rehabilitated. There are different ways we could do it. Or why aren't you telling us what that property could be, how it would be used if it were redeveloped? And the answer to both of those questions, both of those forks in this road, is that we're really trying to start down one of those paths. And whichever direction we hear tonight, we'll be starting in earnest the planning for both of those. And if we go the direction of rehabilitation, we'll start looking at more detailed plans from numerous bids and timing and working with the residents and all of those things. If we hear that it's most appropriate to redevelop the property, it's just the first step of what I view as a 1 to 2 year process, I'm guessing, that enlists the entire community, along with experts in the fields of urban development, redevelopment, historic preservation, and could help us to meet the council's goals and vision for what that property could be in the future. So all of those answers are still to come, whichever direction you give tonight. But we are looking for some direction so that, first of all, the residents do have some clarity on the direction from the city, which way we're going to go with this long term, and also so that we can start with that future for Geneva Village, whichever way you decide is best for our long-term future. So I'm going to ask Mr. Reister to give some background once again on the property and what's needed to rehabilitate the property long term. And then we'll come back and speak to some of the other issues related to historic preservation and cost and what the future process could look like, and then come back and circle back at the end to those basic options, and then seek your discussion and your direction. Brittany's here, not planning to present, but I know she's eager to help answer any questions again about the work she's done and some of the challenges facing the residents of the community there as we try to keep that interest at the forefront. So, turn it over to Keith.
Thanks, Keith Reister, Public Works and Utilities Director. Probably the best thing for you all is my voice is tired, so I won't talk like the police chief tonight for a really long time. So for me, actually, tonight is an important threshold. About 4.5 years ago, the city manager walked into my office when it was still in this building and said, "You have to take this facility over." The city hasn't managed this facility since 1977. But South Metro Housing Options has decided it doesn't fit in their portfolio, so here you go. The city doesn't manage any residential property, never has. So the first thing we had to do is go out and get some professional help. And for me, as the Public Works and Utilities Director, it became very clear that we'd kind of pushed this policy decision down the road for, frankly, decades. And my role was to reach some kind of conclusion for the benefit of the people that live there as to what the future was. That's the place that I started. And so that's where we are tonight. And it's taken us a while to get there, but that's That's the route that I've been on. So basically, we've talked about this in the past. There's 2.8 acres out there. It was originally built in '64. The city purchased this entire parcel in 1975 on a citizen ballot initiative to build City Hall, which then occurred after that. The Geneva Lodge was built first, and then later on, Geneva Village was built. And Eugene Sternberg was the architect for that. He's also done some other work in town as well as throughout the region as well. So obviously anything that was built during 1975, regardless whether it's a home or a business building, comes with its issues, regardless of what they are. They tend to be asbestos, lead pipes, and other issues, or fire safety and life safety issues. Doesn't matter. I have an old house. It's the same way. So what happens is we're in a situation where let's look at options. And so one of those options is rehabilitation of this property. And so anytime we do that, we're going to be required to build to our own building code, which has been adopted by the city. And that includes mandatory upgrades for things like abatement for asbestos, electrical codes, plumbing codes, all of those things, just like anybody else pulling a permit in the city. And so that's what we're faced with as we go forward with the rehabilitation, which certainly is doable. You know, we can go down any path. We can certainly deliver on that. And currently, obviously, the ADA wasn't passed at that time, so pretty much nothing on that property is ADA compliant. And we've inventoried that over the last couple of years as we've worked on the city's ADA plan as well. So if we were going to rehabilitate the property, one of the things that we would need to do is we would obviously, the first thing we would do is bring in a specialty architect and specialty contractor. The estimates that we've done up to this point, we brought in some firms that really specialized in this. One of the firms that we brought in specialized in rehabilitation like this of similar types of housing in Boulder, which has a higher historic preservation standard than we do. And so when we went into that, the things that we would have to take on would be heating, ventilation, air conditioning, electrical, demolition of areas. And, you know, as an example of how this works out is we recently had a pipe break and we had to go in there and do some work and we had to pull the carpets out. The problem with that is the carpets were adhered to the floor, which is all asbestos tile. So you're in a mandatory abatement situation. You can't just ignore that. It's not legal. So in that situation, we went through the process of looking at what it would be cost per square foot on the unit size to take a look at rehabilitating the property, including, you know, modern energy efficiency, fire safety, life safety, all those kind of things as well. And many of those things are listed up there. Inside the units, the price tag that you see here includes, if we were obviously bringing the units all the way down as you built it out. The rest of the property, though, would have to be dealt with separately from an ADA standpoint. So that's not included in the estimate, to clarify sort of the ADA question on that. So when we worked with the professionals that specialize in this work, we worked through all of the sections that you see here. This estimate was actually prepared a couple of 18-plus months ago, and I can tell you as someone who manages facilities and construction that the price of everything is up versus where it was even a year to 2 years ago. And so if we were to proceed with the rehabilitation, what we would do is we would bring in a specialty architect, we'd bring in a specialty engineering firm and a specialty contractor, and we would develop a very detailed estimate that we would then proceed with to go forward to execute the work, if that's the direction that council wanted to go. So that's sort of the background. As you can see up there, that's the cost per square foot per unit. That cost all there also includes work on the community space, in essence, the community room that's in there and those kind of things, because that would have to be addressed as well. And we would work with certainly partners like South Metro Housing Options to make sure that whatever rehabilitation we did met the standards of what we would expect in a modern affordable housing units.
So let's spend a moment on how the city might do that if you chose to go the rehabilitation path. we looked at several options, and there's more information on this in your packet, but we did look at several options, finance rehabilitation work like this. And probably the best option that we had would be to issue certificates of participation, which are a common financing tool for cities, but that would give us the longest period for paying back a loan that we would need to make these repairs. So that if we had borrowed the money to the $5.1 million, if that's in fact what it turned out to be, when you break that all the way down to the debt service due by year and then by month and then to the units, the 29 units in Geneva Village, that came to about $1,150 per month that would have to be covered in terms of debt service for that kind of loan. So when we talk about what rents could have to be with the fully rehabilitated Geneva Village, we have to first look at it, agreed, it's the one that has the most impact on residents, but it's also most similar to how many landlords would have to approach an investment like this, or property owners, where, the debt service on any kind of loan to rehabilitate the property would probably be built into the rents paid by the residents over the length of the loan. So in this case, if we did that over 20 years, that debt service payment component of rent could be, again, almost, it's about $1,150. We also would want to make sure that we're covering our operating costs, which are mostly utilities. Those costs have gone up in recent years, as all of our utilities have. But any of our other operating costs, you see there could be about $476 per month. We also think it would be appropriate to have a real capital reserve as we go forward from here, that we would, accumulate funding, small portion in rents, so that when major improvements are needed in the future, we would have some funding. That's just kind of a responsible practice for property owners. Those costs, and again, this is hypothetical because all these costs would have to be further vetted and bid, could be upwards of $1,700 per month. Some of the speakers that you heard tonight referenced some of the transfers between the Geneva Village Fund that we've had and the general fund that happened in 2009 during that financial crisis, and then for subsequent years back and forth. A previous study session with council on this topic, we went through all of those back and forth transfers. They are. And the net of those, it's still kind of in favor of the general fund, I'd say, is $254,000. If the council decided to kind of settle that and bring it back to even, that $254,000, again, if you went this route, could be used to defray some of that potential principal on a loan. And we've just shown here how that could reduce the payment that would be needed on a monthly basis by $60, I would guess, $55 or so per month. So rent could be, if a loan were paid off as part of the rents over 20 years, we're showing here that could be over $1,600 per month in rent, which we all would say is not meeting the goals of affordability that I believe we all have. We also make the note here that if the city were to use one of the city's other revenues to pay for, say, half of the rehab costs and defray even more of that loan that could be taken, we just wanted to give an illustration of how that could help bring that rent down, and we're showing that, if it were half, it could bring it down to about $1,100 or $1,200. So, along with that information on what it might cost, staff has, some cautions on how we could pay for this, just given all of the other responsibilities that the city has for ongoing day-to-day services, as well as the tremendous backlog of capital and maintenance projects that the community is well aware of. But we are recommending that if the council were to take that rehab route, that, most, if not all of those costs should be borne by, by the individuals, not necessarily living there today, but over the next 20 years, that would probably be at least consistent with other property management, property ownership practices. So we're pointing out here that our general fund, we strongly recommend be prioritized for the benefit of the community at large. The major services the city funds are from that fund, police and all of our public works, as well as our library, museum. So we don't think that's the best source. The city does have a relatively new special sales tax for capital that can be used for facilities. And in fact, this property would qualify under the terms approved by the voters for use of our 3A sales tax funding. At the same time, staff would recommend that those funds, again, be prioritized for the projects that are like our roads and our open spaces, many of our utilities, our drainage, those projects that benefit the entire community at large. And finally, we recognize that there are some revenues and some grants, I'll say, at the state level. And the city has a new affordable housing, inclusionary housing ordinance that could, over time, generate some revenue for projects like Geneva Village. However, the more we learn about those funds, especially at the state level, we don't think we should bank on those funds being accessible for projects of the nature and scale of Geneva Village. So we would caution against assuming that those funds will be available. Finally, as Mr. Reister pointed out, the city, Littleton, given the size we are, we don't have a strong history with managing property, and frankly, we don't think it's our best business to be in. We have talked with South Metro Housing Options, and should the city choose the rehabilitation path, South Metro Housing Options would be open to taking back this property as one of their communities managed, assuming that the city would make policy choices that would bring it back into the rent range and the condition, really more the rent range, that would be expected by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development for those kinds of communities. So, at one of the study sessions, the council did request that the city's Historic Preservation Board have a discussion, have a study session about Geneva Village and offer their observations on the historic character and qualities that make Geneva Village unique for the community. I will point out, because there has been some question about it, staff tried to help the Historic Preservation Board from making a determination on historic significance technically or in any way that could compromise their abilities to fully consider potentially an application for historic landmark designation or any other potential designation that a property could be part of. So that's why the discussion steered more toward unique character and some other characteristics. And it was a lively discussion, and I think you do have a letter in your packet that outlines what some of those characteristics are. Easy for me to say. But it comments on the architectural integrity of the site, the design and the use, talks about how it's a great, classic example of Sternberg architecture, and, is one of our best examples of that architecture. Just talked about some of the characteristics that make it special, the open space, the lines in the architecture and the design. And so those comments are forwarded, it's in your packet, and some of the bullet points are on the screen now of those, of the HPB's observations about Geneva Village. Okay, so we talked about the rehabilitation option and that path. The other option that you could choose tonight to give direction on is to redevelop the site, to start that process. There's a major project, as you know, underway that we're calling Project Downtown that is endeavoring to articulate a vision for optimizing the downtown for the next generations. And it does contemplate a northern gateway along Prince Avenue out from the downtown north to Santa Fe. And, I think a redevelopment process and vision could ensure, integration with that plan in a way that we might not have foreseen 60 years ago. And so that's one reason that the council might consider redevelopment. I think there are lots of options. We've heard lots of concerns from some about selling the property, some from keeping the property. The city would have those options. The city owns the property, which is a pretty powerful position to be in when you're considering development of a site. And so I think that's an advantage. The city could have significant influence with the development community and ultimately a development partner for what that site looks like and what the property status is. This visioning process would take some time, and we think is best to be keyed off of the completion of Project Downtown, which is slated to come to council in April of 2024. So we would probably want to start with some of that vision in terms of what this property could be. And I'll say, it could also certainly assist with advancing council's goals for housing. That's a very high priority for the city council. And I think it could tie in with significant new housing while incorporating historic elements of the property or some of those Sternberg design characteristics. I want to pause, or not pause, but I want to spend a moment reinforcing some of those themes that came from Be Connected's study that was done, interviews with each of the residents to determine, a wide range of health and ability to kind of forge a future there. And the report is rich with data about the community. I'd say that some of these bullet points are the most germane perhaps to the council's consideration tonight, but just points out that all of the residents there are senior citizens. From a wellness standpoint, the community has been struggling. It was borne out in Ms. Catalinas's interviews that the community is struggling with uncertainty, and they are almost entirely living on fixed, limited incomes averaging $18,000, which is well below the 30% average median income. The rent hasn't changed for decades, and we've gotten so far behind with those rents at the level where they are that there really is there are not alternative units that could be available for the residents at comparable rent. Therefore, housing choice vouchers and those kinds of tools will likely be needed for for most of the residents to find their way to comparable, safe housing. However, at the same time, residents, have maintained a good quality of life on fixed incomes, and they genuinely value the community's safety and the central location of Geneva Village. The City Council has already authorized staff to assist as much as we can with some of the uncertainty facing the residents. Ms. Catalinas has worked with all the residents who are interested to obtain spots on the housing voucher waiting list, and also with some of the housing navigation that goes along with that, awareness of those opportunities, readiness to move to either another public housing community or identify any other options associated with family that some of them may have. But the city is poised, and we have started to help residents with those costs, since we know there's going to be instability again, whichever path we choose here. And the city has started financially assisting residents with the cost for things like housing navigation and moving and inspections and security deposits and all of those things that come along with a move. So again, whichever way we go, we believe that we should continue with these services, and hopefully Ms. Catalinas willing, keep that strong alliance that she has developed in helping residents. So, starting to summarize here, as we look at next steps, if the choice is to rehabilitate the community, the facilities, we would work with residents to relocate temporarily as necessary. We would start to develop those timing and resource plans to balance the priorities of efficient construction. That is, it'll make sense to do as much of this at one time as possible. Balance that with resident compassion. Probably see construction in 24 and 25. We would negotiate that management agreement with South Metro Housing Options, and then start leasing with any of the updated terms that would be consistent with SMHO's requirements and federal requirements to manage the property. On the redevelopment path side, we do suggest that we leave a significant amount of time for residents to make decisions and obtain vouchers as they would like to, as they choose to, and find their path for alternative, secure, safe housing, and that might take some time. So, staff would suggest, and we're not asking you to settle on this tonight, but that we might set a date at, about 2+ years out, the end of 2025, when we might plan to close the community if we're going down that redevelopment path. And during that time, we would like to continue working with residents to relocate within Littleton as much as possible. There are several communities opening that could be suitable for the residents of Geneva Village over the next year with South Metro Housing Options. We'd also, in parallel to that 2 years, start engaging the community and urban and historic design partners in doing that visioning for future property use. And as we said before, that might take 1 year, it might take better part of a couple years. I'm assuming for general timing that it might take a couple years. We'd then have a period of actual design for the property that the council envisions as a product of that process. Then we move into to construction and leasing. And we want to mention that there could be, this is some recent activity, there may be some policy making for council regarding the city's acceptance for Geneva Village of those housing choice vouchers. So the city is kind of understanding where SMHO is with that at this time, but we wanted to mention it tonight, so that you know that if within the next even couple months, we have some policy choices to make, that could be another step along the process if we choose, particularly the redevelopment option. By way of a staff recommendation, we think given all of the information that's been amassed, all the planning the city's doing, the city's current housing, the city's current priorities, including housing and downtown, updated vision, and, that it's advisable at this point to start down that redevelopment path. That the future use for Geneva Village could be a better fit for the downtown, for the plans that we have for that gateway, and also for achieving some housing goals that could be both, we think, affordable, kind of some mixed affordability uses there. We also think that it's very feasible if the council chooses to carry that theme of incorporating Sternberg historic design principles into the next chapter for Geneva Village. We also think we should look at integration of some rental and for sale units in that gateway. We believe that if we start down this path, there will probably be some interest from other properties in that Prince Street gateway for additional redevelopment that could give us even more housing options, more retail options along Prince there. That speaks to that next bullet of mixed use. And then finally, we would encourage a really vigorous process that does partner with property owners in the downtown, both residential and commercial, and our now formed and now really active downtown development authority to really build support and ensure that fit with the downtown that we're all envisioning. So with that, consistent with the staff recommendation, we do have a recommended motion for council that would just start us down this path tonight. I won't read it for you, but you can read what's on the screen. I would say that if the council chooses the other path, the rehabilitation path, that you could modify this motion to substitute that path for redevelopment of Geneva Village. So Mayor, we'd be glad to answer any questions, and we look forward to your direction.
Does council have any questions? I know I have a few questions, but any questions? Councilmember Grove.
If we were to rehabilitate, would we be able to accept Section 8 vouchers?
I'll invite Brittany to elaborate, but I believe the answer is that that could be the case. It would depend on what that final rent is, which would, also depend on how much of a potential construction loan would be paid by the city versus the long-term residents there, and also the city's willingness to, I think, comply and set rates at levels that meet HUD's requirements for those vouchers. Is that pretty accurate? Feel free to go a different direction.
Currently, your housing authority's payment standard, that's South Metro Housing Options. I'm not exact on the number, but I think it's like $13.46. It's a payment standard for a one-bedroom, which is actually, below the current rental price of rents in Littleton right now. So I believe the proposed rents were almost $1,700. So the vouchers would have to increase significantly, or the city would have to subsidize somehow for those vouchers to lease up at the redevelopment process. So fortunately, I'm like, we got to increase those vouchers significantly.
We talked about lowering the rent,
Right.
and then it would qualify for that amount?
Yeah, it would just have to be significantly lower from the projection. The projected number was 1,700 almost up here. Your current housing authority's payment standard for a one-bedroom is around like 1,340.
So we
something.
talked about like 1,100 if we did some sort of debt structure, and then it would be within
That
the.
would, I missed that, yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
I think the answer is potentially, just depends on the
Potentially.
structure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Milliman?
Currently, there are 24 units, is that right? 28, sorry. And if we did go down the redevelopment path, about a range of how many new housing homes could we potentially put on this site? A range?
I know that in a prior presentation, we talked about the range, again, depending heavily on design of the community, but based on densities, it could be at least 75 units, could be, could go up north of 100 units. So that would be the potential for new housing. So a 3 or 4-fold
And that would be
increase.
1 to 3 bedroom homes, or just?
I don't think we've even gotten there yet.
That's
Yeah,
details
yeah.
that have not been.
I'm just trying to conceptualize, like, going from this to this. Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Valdez?
Kind of to add on to your question there, a property that size, you could easily put a, 50-unit building there. If you start putting 100 units on that property, it's going to look very, very bulky. So, 40 to 50 units would be very normal. And to get to Councilmember Grove's point about Section 8, yeah, you can get Section 8, but it's very unlikely. It'd be very tough to get it, but not impossible. But you'd have to apply and do all that good stuff. So it is possible. It's the same thing if we were to take out, to be awarded low-income housing tax credit. That would be awesome. As you heard Corey talk about that at our last meeting, that's a very possible thing. It's probably more likely to get that than it would be a Section 8.
Any other questions? I've got a handful here. Let's see. These two questions are kind of intertwined here. I guess the first one is housing instability for the residents avoidable in any way going forward? Is there any way that they won't be displaced, whether it's renovating or redeveloping completely?
Maybe. Obviously in redevelopment, there'd be displacement. In terms of the rehabilitation, it would depend on how you phase the project, but regardless, you're gonna have to move people, even if you keep them on the site, you rehabilitate, you're gonna have to move them from a location that they're in to be able to rehabilitate it. So
there will be some displacement, even if it's
Right.
50 yards or 500 yards?
Yeah.
Right,
Even
right,
if they-
movement, yeah, well.
Right.
From
So-
their current location, yeah.
It would be a sequencing, and, obviously, if you're rehabilitating, you're gonna wanna do that, building by building as opposed to unit by unit, in order to facilitate getting all the back house systems done, like electrical and plumbing and those kind of things.
Which is one of the reasons why the vacancies weren't being filled about 3 years ago. Because that was part of the consideration that we were talking back then, 3-4 years ago, and then COVID hit. So we just never sort of rented them again.
Right. I guess this is for Brittany. Since you've been, talking to these women and getting to know them and their circumstances, could you talk about how would renovating the units and then raising the rents at Geneva Village affect them versus you're relocating to a different property with similar rent as what would be required at Geneva Village? Is there?
Are you asking me for my professional opinion?
Yes, do you have an unprofessional
Yeah,
opinion?
well, that just wasn't what I was,
Yeah.
wasn't part of my work scope. So I would just want to be mindful
Yeah, okay.
of that piece. Keith, do you want to take a stab at that? Just so I make sure I understand the question, I'm a community developer and landlord. I work on behalf of developers. Just so make sure I get it, if you want to do a redevelopment on property, what would that look like with the tenants?
I was just thinking, just how is this gonna, if we stuck with rehabilitation, I mean, there's gonna be, some sort of displacement while there's a rehabilitation going on, and then some financial additional burden. I'm just trying to weigh the difference between that. Is it so much different to be relocated elsewhere with the financial burden and the movement around there?
A same site move is cheaper than a move off-site, and that's a very different relocation off-site versus on-site. And that's more of what I can look at. So the cost would be, from my perspective, to move them. The units just passed federal inspection on HQS inspection. So they could move to another unit that would meet federal standards, so meet their health and safety. As that rehabilitation moved forward, when I am doing any cost analysis, I'm looking at, 2 to 3 different cost analysis at a time when I'm comparing what redevelopment would look like versus rehabilitating those units. So I would need more information at my fingertips to be able to better answer that. But it would be less working with the women and the data that we have seen. Staying at Geneva Village is really important to them, and it would be less stressful since the majority of them do want to stay and are in favor of rehabilitating the unit. So just from an emotional standpoint, I think it would be much more easier and more trauma informed with the residents versus moving them off property. We just did move them off property. Well, one tenant off property 2 weeks ago. She relocated to another apartment building with her Section 8 voucher, which was exciting. I tagged you guys on social media. She was really excited about her move. But yeah.
Okay. And I got two more questions probably for Keith here. So would redevelopment of the site be possible at the same time preserving perhaps 1 or 2 buildings and the clock tower, either on site or elsewhere in the city?
Certainly, those are options. You can, when you, having done, historical sites before where you're retaining part of it, you can always work with that's part of working with your engineer and your designer and your architect to make that happen. Certainly, if we cut the clock tower, I'm going to redo all of the internal workings so it actually works. Every clock tower I've had has been like that in my career. So we can certainly accommodate that. If I would not necessarily recommend just actually physically moving a building to, say, another site. I think that would be certainly be a challenge either way. But you can work that into any plan. I mean, Carson Nature Center was moved there. So, all those things are workable. You can come in, you can design a site to incorporate features that you want.
Okay. And then kind of speaking of designing this site in a potential redevelopment, I think it was the map with the entire city campus, city center campus there. Could that be replatted to kind of change the parcels there to kind of meet this idea of it's been thrown out there, that this idea of a town square, even better than it currently is, with, redrawing the lines so there's a actually defined town square there?
So we've discussed that at different times with legal and with community development, and you can always do that as a property owner. One of the challenges in this particular case particularly is the lot that Geneva Lodge sits on, and the configuration of that lodge, that particular parcel, in its historic designation. So that would be, I know that's one kind of challenge in the middle of the site. That's not my specialty, but we can certainly explore that if that was something. As we, from the Public Works side, we've always planned to take a look at, in the next few years, take a look at what Geneva Park itself here should be, and how it can be a vital anchor to the community. It's a fairly passive park, which is great, but do we want to incorporate some things in there that, draw more people in? Or it's a unique place in the sense that you've got a lot of large trees still here, and you've got a lot of memorial trees in it. So we would, incorporate that into any design as well.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Councilor Valdez?
Question. So I know your estimate was around $5 million to rehab it, and I'm sure that's way low at this point. Have you considered at all about rehabbing just a few of the buildings? We're at 12 residents right now, and that's what, two buildings basically, two, maybe three. So rehabbing 2 or 3 buildings for those folks to move into, and then creating other buildings where the empty buildings would then be. Has that been any consideration at all?
Those are certainly all options, to do, in essence, a partial rehabilitation. One of the challenges of just picking the buildings, obviously, is the mix of units, because we do have a mix of occupied units types now. They're not all, as you know, they're not all one single type, so we'd have to do some alignment there. But the other challenge certainly would be where on the site you would do that would allow the other portion of the site to be actively developed, to make that portion of the site effective from a whatever it is, redevelopment standpoint. As opposed to, if you leave one building in the center, that's completely, that changes everything on a site. It makes the site very different. So we can always do something along those lines for sure, if that's an option.
I'll just point out that I think questions about site and building orientation and how much could be developed and how much could be preserved, those would be, I think, very central questions to that planning phase if we were to, because a redevelopment of the site could certainly include preservation of a portion of the site. The focus would be on the city council's goals for housing and that integration with downtown and the other points that we meant, but there's no, it doesn't mean that you have to redevelop, all the entire site or raise and then rebuild the whole site. So all of those, but you could, that's why we don't have those answers tonight, but that would be really the crux of that process that we would go through to meld your vision with, the community and experts in this field.
Great. All right, well, I just want to say one thing before we have, if there's a motion, if there's no more questions, or if there's anything else that people want to comment on. I just want to say that, to echo some of the comments that some commenters said before, is that, this decision isn't about what we individually, or we even as a council necessarily want. This is about what's best for the entire community. If it was just about 14 or 15 people, it would be actually a real easy decision, but it's about almost 50,000 people. I mean, this is a big, important part of our city, not only to the residents, but to all of the residents and all of our businesses, and that's why this has taken so long. I know the residents have been in limbo for several years now, and I hope, no matter how it goes tonight, the outcome of tonight, that there's some clarity with what the next steps are, and there's not that uncertainty waiting. So if anyone has anything else to add, or if there's someone that has a motion so we can have further discussion.
Mayor, I move to direct staff to proceed with planning to begin redevelopment of the Geneva Village site and to continue assisting residents with relocation needs and report back to council within 90 days to discuss next steps.
Second. All right, so there is a motion and a second to direct staff to proceed in the redevelopment process of that. Council, any comments? Councilmember, oh. I heard Mayor Pro Tem first here.
She spoke up.
Well, I realize that this is probably the biggest decision I've had to make while on city council. and, or at least, so far. And I have a lot of feelings around it. I think first, and bear with me here, you're gonna hear my thought process. I think first, I'm really disappointed. I'm disappointed in our city, I think, for getting to this point. I mean, the rehabilitation proposals 6 years ago were, $450,000, which is very different from the 5 million where we're at today. I'm also really sad knowing that we probably could have housed 15 or so or more seniors or senior families in those unoccupied units that we've had these last few years, but we had those deferred maintenance and the lack of investment in landscaping and the upkeep. I think that's badly done on our part. And I think Susan, Dave, Dan, you all kind of spoke to that a little bit, and I agree with you there. I'm actually kind of proud also of the current city council and the staff for tackling this issue now and tackling it respectfully. Councilmember Valdez, you've spoken before about how other councils have kind of kicked this down the road. And I'm really glad that we took this up because it is hard. And I think someone earlier spoke to the tension, and we're definitely feeling that. Jim, I know you went personally to meet with folks at Geneva Village, and that is way better than the letter I know a lot of folks got a couple years ago from the previous city administration informing you about the vacancy decisions. And I think, Mark, you said it earlier, this is unfair to those citizens who felt like the city was waiting for them to die. That hit me hard too. Geneva residents, I am also really impressed with you and the advocates who came out tonight. You really are here fighting for, your way of life, and that's meant a lot to me. You've helped me understand how this policy decision affects your day-to-day life. The mayor and I, we met with many of you last March. You gave us a tour of your property. You invited us into your homes, and I really want to thank you for that. You've also helped me understand the historical context of this property. Last year, we were given a packet of information that had some newspaper clippings. I think it had about the sale of the property. It had information about the design and Sternberg's vision for the community. It was done through the library, so it was like these old articles. And I mean, I'm a history major, so I kind of geek out on primary sourced information. But that was really helpful. Many of the residents, you also drafted a proposal last year aimed to make that property completely sustainable. And I really appreciated your efforts to do that. I did review it. Now what I found though is that it didn't take into consideration the huge cost of renovation, that $5 million. It assumed full capacity immediately, and that's just not possible. The cost estimate, again, was $1 million over 10 years, which doesn't quite jive with the $5 million estimate that the city received in their request for proposal. I'm also really grateful. I'm grateful that we had American Rescue Plan funding available to hire Brittany, a social worker, right, to offer some of that individual support to the current residents who are there. When I met with those residents last year, I heard your concerns about displacement and feeling like you were just going to be thrown out. And I promised you that I wouldn't let that happen. And I think I might have even said, since I'm a social worker myself, that I would come and offer support. So I'm really glad that we have Brittany to help through that process. And the research that you provided, Brittany, for us was also really helpful in informing my decision. I'm very appreciative for those who are here tonight, thinking through about the preservation of the space and the citizens living there. And I completely agree with some of your arguments about the need for housing, especially housing for those on fixed incomes. What I don't think I've heard tonight is how to adequately fund those renovations and preservations that doesn't actually compromise the intent of that building, which is affordability and to some extent even respite. When we asked the city staff to do this, to look into those renovation costs and rehabilitation for preservation, I was really disappointed to learn that to fund those through those bids and bonds, the rent that would be needed to recoup that for the future, that's $1,600 a month. I mean, that's a lot, and that would not be covered by any housing vouchers. And of course, if then if the city, funneled in half of that money, maybe they could, recoup that. But that said, we're still only limited to 28 units. And that space, like Councilmember Valdez and Jim mentioned, has potential for 3 times as many homes for people on fixed incomes. In one of our study sessions, our city had looked into maybe making the property, preserving it, and making the property be for sale. And the purchase price would then kind of cover the cost of those renovations. And then it could be preserved. However, again, kind of disappointed that there's so many HOA rules and insurance requirements for communal living like that, that the monthly costs would really not benefit those on fixed incomes. So I think it's my belief that people and families are what make up our communities, not buildings themselves. And I'm always going to prioritize the former. We have a housing crisis in Littleton, especially for renters, and we just need more homes. And that need that we have now, I believe we have to adapt to that need. That's how our city is going to survive. Benjamin, Patrick, I think they talked about that earlier in their testimonies. And we especially need more homes for families on fixed incomes and young single-income households. Philip, thank you for bringing that to light in your testimony today. And I think we need more ADA-compliant homes, for sure. Therefore, I do want to see this property redeveloped, and I want it 100% affordable, not just a majority, which is in the recommendation from our city staff. And I'm going to define that. What I mean by that is I want that for families making less than $50,000 per year. That ends up being about 60% of our area median income. And that's what I'm going to continue to push for throughout this process. And I will also add, if there's a way for current residents to give an option to return, I want to advocate for them to have that option. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Grove.
I do not support redevelopment. Right now, Geneva Village looks old. It doesn't look kind of quaint. It's kind of run down, and it needs to be refurbished. It's easy to think that tearing it down would be a good option because it's old. What if our previous city leaders thought that the Carnegie Library, Town Hall, or the courthouse were in need of renovation and it would have been better to tear it down? We wouldn't have our quaint downtown. We wouldn't have what makes us unique. We wouldn't have the character or the way to draw businesses in. Centennial is very envious of our quaint downtown. And this is why. It reminds us of a bygone era. And that's what Geneva Village is. It's the last Sternberg mid-century modern residential property in Littleton. And his work epitomizes our heritage. He built a residential units for seniors with a focus on community, access to green space, buildings with a lot of light, that emphasized his vision of what resembled a village. We haven't talked about the fact that this is a square, a village, and that people can interact very easily. We learned from our social worker here that one of the key things that these residents enjoyed was porch sitting. And I have to extrapolate that is to be with other residents. In these days of becoming isolated and loneliness becoming an epidemic that actually takes people's lives, why should we not be good stewards of our community and protect the way of life and rehabilitate this historic asset? We need to look ahead over the next decade. Should our legacy be a building with high rises? That doesn't preserve our heritage. We need to make sure that the places that people are going to live are good ones, and not buildings that take away open space. Geneva Village sits at the gateway to our downtown. We should own and control that land so that we do with it what we want. We get very frustrated with South Suburban and how they manage some of our parks. This is a place where we have control over it. Last week we heard how hard it is to get affordable housing financing. It will be difficult to build affordable housing without subsidies. Any affordable housing will require diligence and creativity to build. We have affordable housing that relies on some incentives, and we could have market rate units to help make up the difference. Why couldn't we have done to Geneva Village some sort of combination of market rate and affordable, like our inclusionary housing ordinance? I realize there's demand for affordable housing in downtown specifically. Remember, we have downtown housing units throughout downtown. 139 is quoted by staff, plus some unknown additional number at Nevada streets. There's another 1,400 known units, affordable housing units, outside of downtown, including 600 units Schmo manages. Bradley House for sale homes, with Habitat for Humanity, Amity Place, Allison Court. There's the John Newley Family Housing, the new Overlook. In addition, we heard last week that Schmo is going to purchase land on Rapp Street and build affordable housing. People say we need affordable housing downtown. It can happen there. I realize that our city's core competency is not being a landlord, yet here we are. We need to own it and do the best we can for our future residents. A 5-story high-rise that dramatically reduces open space is not what we should build. And I'm glad to hear if we do go the development route, we would do a nod to Sternberg. What we're talking about is demolishing, if we think about it, demolishing Geneva Village for a delta of 47 units. We have 28, and we can build 50. This is for 47 units that can probably be built down the street on Rapp Street. And I don't think we as a city and our heritage of our council should be that we should demolish this historical asset for 47 units. I'd sincerely hope that fellow council members would consider that in terms of our long term. If a historical asset is lost, it's lost forever. You can't rebuild it. It won't come back. And I think it's important as stewards of our historical assets that we strongly consider that in terms of this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Valdez, please.
I feel like I'm going up after a child or a dog has done an act. That was well done. Thank you very much. There was a question earlier, or a statement made earlier, that Littleton hasn't built a lot of homes over the years. But over the past, at least the time I've been on council and part of that on planning commission, we've built over 10,000 homes throughout the city. There's been a lot. So, and you wouldn't even know that, but it has happened time and time again. And I think if we have in the works, there's some that could possibly be built over the next, 10, 20 years, many units. There's opposition to that. Yet we have one group that says we need more homes, another group says we don't want more homes. That, it's always a conflict with the city. That's why we have to make these tough decisions. One thing that I heard that I think buildings are what a city is. It tells the story of the city. It tells the story of the people that built those buildings, the people that lived in that city. I think it is having buildings that have been preserved, that we have mainly down on Main Street. I think that's wonderful. It tells a little bit about our city. And in the city, we do have property throughout the city that the city owns and in some case manage, but if not, we contract it out to South Suburban Parks and Rec, who manage our parks. But we do have other properties that we manage and have people on staff that takes care of that. And residential buildings are very different, and that being the business that I'm in, I know a lot about that kind of stuff, of course. That's why I'm thinking that I hate to see the entire property be scraped and rebuilt, and especially not owned by the city. In my opinion, we need to hold on to that property. And we can put out a request for quotes from organizations. We talk about the Littleton Housing Authority, or SHMO, South Metro Housing. There's a lot of organizations out there that are nonprofit that will provide a bid on what they can do, how they can manage and operate it. So we need to open this up to a bid to organizations that are willing to come in and take this on. They can have some great ideas there. And I think we can preserve part of that property, maybe not the whole thing, but we can develop. I mean, it's almost 3 acres. So we can do a lot of stuff there without putting in, say, 75 or 100 units. I think that'd be atrocious to put that on that small of a property, just under 3 acres. I'm got a runny nose here. Let's see. And the city, I think we're here to help out the residents. We are here to, we're just not gonna say you have 90 days, you gotta go. Over the years, we have talked about what is it we can do for the residents, and it may be paying for relocation, it may be paying for rents, it may be paying for the cost to move some of their utilities, whatever it may be. We just can't walk away from 12 residents now. And we keep saying they're women. There were a lot of guys that lived there at one time. They just haven't lasted as long, maybe. And I would like to see something developed on that property. And I would also like to see it to be considered that it be named after one of the residents. And one of the residents I'm thinking of is Jerry Hill. And there's other residents. But when I was on the Housing Authority, Jerry Hill used to be on the Housing Authority, and then he used to go to the meetings after that. And there's probably some other residents that should be considered. But again, it's not uncommon for an owner of a residential multifamily property to own that property, but not manage that property. So this is something the city can do. And that would still leave that property available for city use if need be way down the line, 100 years, whatever it may be. We did keep the lodge, and to our Public Works Director, do you have any idea how much we spent on that building?
When we moved in there, we spent about $350,000, but that was mostly tied to security and data.
Yeah, and I went in that building before we touched that building. It was a wreck, and raccoons lived in there, and other little critters lived in there. That's a beautiful building. I would hate to have thought that we had scraped that building. Now it sort of means something. Buildings do tell a story. I think they are important to our city to hang on to those that we can. And as Councilman Grove said, because once you scrape them, they're gone. I think when you come around the corner there off of Santa Fe onto Prince, and you see the low profile of Geneva Village, I think it's cool. Versus running into a wall with windows. I think if we could somehow have a decent bid from someone who can really design something, maybe step it back to where we could add something new with more units. And last but not least, I think didn't we just recently pass an ordinance that said anybody that comes in and builds so many units, was it over 10 units or something like that, that some of them had to be affordable, not low income, but affordable, whatever that means. Yeah, I did. No, this was this council that passed it, it wasn't that long ago. So we do have that, because I heard some comments about people saying that, we need this, we need that. This council did put that in place just not too long ago. So anyway, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks. Councilmember Driscoll.
Sure, thank you. Thanks to everybody that came out tonight, especially the residents, and for those people that emailed us. I really do appreciate all those comments, and they're not taken lightly. The city and Geneva Village it's been a great addition to the city, since the 60s, and when we bought it in 1974. Over the years, many residents have had the privilege of living there and building wonderful relationships. Since I joined council a little over, coming up on 6 years, this has been the biggest concern in District 1 that I've been hearing about. So I feel for the residents, and I applaud this council, city mayor, staff for taking on this finally, and getting some direction on what to do with this property. It hasn't been difficult, so I'm glad we're finally there. I believe the goal of city council is to make decisions for the betterment of the entire community, and this is one of those times. I know many of you say the units are fine, but we heard from Public Works Director that they need a lot of work, and the cost is astronomical. And with all due respect, somebody made a comment about we need more time to talk about it amongst the community. We've been talking about this for 20+ years, and this is the time that we finally, people have expressed their opinions tonight, but with humility, I say the prudent, responsible thing is to give direction to move forward with the redevelopment of this property.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilmember Millen?
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, giving us your thoughts and opinions, sharing your hearts, your emotions about this property. And I agree with Pat. This property has been in discussion for many, 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 many years. And I do want to thank our city staff for all of the hard work that you've put in. And Brittany, thank you so much for Be Connected and all of the data that you've brought to us. We really, really appreciate that. And I agree with Gretchen. I'm very proud of this particular council. I mean, it's a hard decision, but I'm glad that we're taking the steps to finally make this decision, so there is some clarity for the residents and for the community as a whole going forward. So this, as Pat said, the decision that we make tonight, it's not only impacting the 12 residents that currently live at Geneva Village, but it's impacting our community as a whole. And this is going to be for decades and decades to come. And I think it was Patrick Santana said tonight earlier, I thought it was very interesting when he was talking about the history of the city of Littleton and the changes that have occurred over the decades to meet the needs of the society at that particular moment of time. So as most of you know, I'm the liaison for South Metro Housing Options, and I'm a member of the Housing Task Force. And for the last 4 years, I have heard over and over and over again the severe lack of diverse housing options that we have within our city. In redeveloping Geneva Village, we have a very unique opportunity to meet the goal for more housing and also to incorporate the North Gateway with our overall vision for our downtown. I know that redeveloping Geneva Village and adding more housing, that is not going to solve our housing goals, but it puts the needle, it moves the needle forward so that we can meet these housing goals for our citizens. We have the opportunity to honor Eugene Sternberg's work at Geneva Village by creating a new space that values and emphasizes community and creates accessible living spaces while directly engaging open spaces. I'm going to support staff's recommendations to redevelop this property, and I do look forward to participating in the process. We can hang on to the past while moving forward. We have the opportunity to find thoughtful, creative developers who can come in to honor that legacy. And I'm very interested actually in mixed use and mixed income for that property. So it'll be an interesting process going forward, and I look forward to being a participant in that. So I am supporting redevelopment.
Councilmember Barr?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start this off by echoing something that Mayor Pro Tem said, that this was probably the hardest decision that at least I've faced while on council. So, and as a result, you'll hear me speechify a little bit more than usual. So, sorry.
More than usual?
More than usual, less than the chief. He's not here. So when we're asked to weigh the future of a small number of residents and to put that in the larger perspective of our responsibilities of good governance, of fiscal responsibility, of equity in our service delivery, and a respect for our history and our homes. And that's why this decision is so challenging. But before I get into those details, I really do want to start off with an apology to the residents of Geneva Village. And, you know, I want to say I was so happy and humbled to take a tour of your homes and around your community, and really to confirm what we've heard from the residents themselves, that the homes are well maintained, that the residents treat these homes you know, with the respect and care that it deserves, and that the decision we have in front of us with both of these options is not punitive, but as a result of Littleton's poor oversight, our lack of action, and really multiple compounding decades of inattention to the financial sustainability of the problem. And it truly could have been avoided. And I don't want us to kind of let go of the fact that we didn't have to arrive at quite the decision point that we are. Second guessing those past decisions doesn't change the actions we need to take right now, but it is and has been the city's responsibility, and for that we do owe you all an apology. So we're faced here with a situation where there's not really a perfect answer, but doing nothing is just not a tenable option. We've heard this from our staff. Delaying a decision, even delaying a decision 5 years, has compounding cost factors. Spot fixing issues when they arise is just the least fiscally sound way to approach these challenges. And honestly, the variables that enter into this decision include that financial and managerial sustainability, the present and future needs of our housing. But I think, and there's material costs and the social and material needs of the residents themselves, and truly the value of the historic and the cultural significance of the buildings themselves. And all these variables have value, but they don't all necessarily have equal value. So I think there are some points to consider that we've heard a lot of discussion about this being affordable housing, that it is naturally affordable. And I do want to refute that notion. Affordable housing, at least as we define it as a municipality, means something. It is terminology that is purposeful and it is precise. And what we are doing is dramatically subsidizing housing for a small number of individuals, so much so that it is far from the equal to the kind of housing subsidization that we see through South Metro housing options. It is not a bad thing that a city or a municipality have a hand in providing affordable housing, and we absolutely should, and we should continue to do this work. But it needs to be applied equally and fairly to all of our residents. There is just dramatic need throughout our entire community, throughout the metro area. And so this is not applying an equal set of principles. This is just as a result of managerial neglect, quite honestly. Rehabilitation of the homes would require that the tenants do relocate during the construction. Piecemeal renovation would really prolong the time, be extremely cost ineffective. So I don't necessarily even see a situation, I think to the mayor's question before, where there is no scenario. I see the residents wouldn't be required to move, whether that be a short or a long distance. And so when considering rehabilitation, obviously it does have the advantage of preserving a piece of historic property. And I really do want to thank the HPB and as well as many other residents that have come out to speak about the historic value and the nature of the property. It is meaningful. It is a variable. It is a thing we are taking into consideration. It is not being dismissed in this decision making. And the impact on the residents' lives, moving a longer or greater distance rather than relocating internal to the site, is a huge consideration. It will have a meaningful and measurable impact on their health and well-being, and that has to be acknowledged and known. However, if all the relevant costs that we just discussed were shouldered by these residents, the financial impact on them would be enormous, just due to the small number of residential units that exist on the property. Filling vacancies, increasing rent to be equivalent to our affordable housing supply, and having them shoulder any sort of debt burden and the long-term operation and maintenance of the property would be a huge burden. We would inadvertently turn this, quote-unquote, affordable property into something completely unaffordable by keeping it the way it is and having the residents bear that burden. And I think ultimately this could make Geneva Village an unaffordable place to live. And if the city were to subsidize this option, we would also be making a significant financial investment on behalf of our residents into preserving these existing units. And I want to acknowledge the fact that this option is feasible. Like, as the Public Works Director said, and I'll go ahead and say most engineers will say they can engineer their way out of any existing problem, but there's a cost to it. And so we're not discussing feasibility, but we're discussing what is the most financially responsible alternative when compared to the other options in front of us. So I am supporting the redevelopment of the site because this is what we would say to be the highest and best use of our city's resources that we have charge over. But I'm supporting this option under a few and I think maybe specific conditions, and many of which the staff have laid out, and a few I want to just elaborate on. First and foremost, based on the study performed by Be Connected, we have a good understanding of the financial capacity or lack thereof of the residents. that we retain that responsibility using our American Rescue Plan Act funding and general revenue to ensure that all the residents are able to secure a housing option, not just necessarily have one presented to them. And the preference obviously would be in Littleton. We want to keep our residents in Littleton. Secondly, I believe that the city should continue to own the parcel and absolutely not sell it to the developer in order to retain specific and direct control over the progress of the development of the site and ensure that the conditions that we're laying out here are actually met. The property should be developed under the same guidance as a majority affordable development, at a minimum conforming to the conditions and benefits under that pathway in our inclusionary housing ordinance. But if we were to go above and beyond that, it would not be hurting my feelings. I really do want to see our inclusionary housing ordinance put to use and to demonstrate where we need to make policy changes in the future as well. So in selecting a design team to conduct the redevelopment, I'd ask that the principles of this community-oriented housing be retained in the final design, and that the consultancies and architects embody those principles as Sternberg would have envisioned them. This is possible. Sternberg is not the only architect to have existed that has created community-centric housing options that make good use of small units, shared common space, open space. I happen to live in one, and it's newer. And I'm not saying that this community needs to replicate my community, but I do know that it is possible if consciously directed and developed. And so lastly, I would just ask that we honor the legacy of the homes and the people in a way that's kind of befitting the legacy and the kind of nature of this decision. And obviously there's historic documentation that can be conducted on site that may be federally required, that may be required as part of our historic preservation. I guess I'm less familiar with it than others. But I would also ask that we kind of go a step further and maybe get in touch with our museum director to consider a way to tell the story of both the people and the place and its change through time. And not just check boxes from a federal perspective, but to truly honor the people and the place and tell us a comprehensive story of where it's come from and where it's going. So like I said, I'll be supporting the redevelopment of the site, and thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks. Guess I'm last here. So I'll try to be quick. Jotted down thoughts as we went through here, but some here tonight and have contacted us through email and phone calls have said that we should perhaps wait another 50 years to make a decision on Geneva Village. But continuing to delay a decision is not in the best interest of the city, and kicking the can down the road. It's not in the best interest of the residents either. Most things that city council discusses affects people and affects businesses too. And our decisions affect the future of our community. And I'm actually pretty sure that none of our decisions have ever made everyone happy. There's someone displeased with some of our decisions. And so I'm not, thinking that everyone's gonna be happy with the decisions of the council tonight, but change is difficult, but being static and not changing is difficult too. Can you imagine if you acted the same way you did when you were 5 years old or 10 years old, didn't change and evolve with times and adapt? Well, okay, Jerry, you're an exception. But how this is, it's very clear that this is a really important thing for our community. When we had almost 30 people come to speak to us in person, which I think is actually probably a record for this council, not all councils, but this specific council, come speak to us in person here. A handful more sent emails to voice their opinions as well. And not surprisingly, the opinions were split, roughly 50-50 of people wanting to rehabilitate and people wanting to redevelop. Actually, tonight, the people that spoke in person, there was just a handful more people that were supportive of redevelopment. However, the loudest and those who show up most frequently don't necessarily have opinions that are in the best interest of our entire community or of our community's future. We don't know what a potential redevelopment will look like. I do not agree with the suggestion that 3 or 4 or 5-story buildings count as high-rise development. I wonder if the same people would be in the audience today supporting a rehabilitation of a 15-story tower like the one that Sternberg designed that was in the photo in the staff presentation. We do not know that open space would be diminished in a potential redevelopment. In fact, what I think might be a good idea is to have an actual true town square where people come from all over the city to utilize it, kind of in the southwest corner, which is more of a retention pond right now. I think that having a real square where people can gather, where parades can start, would be a benefit to the community. So potentially open space could increase with the redevelopment. Geneva Village is definitely unique, but in fact, most of our buildings in Littleton are unique, both residential and commercial. And unique does not make it necessarily that it has to stay the same way going on in perpetuity. Main Street does not look like it did 100 or 50 or 25 or even 10 years ago. Places adapt and change and meet the needs of the present, and more importantly, the future, not necessarily just the past. So sometimes honoring the past is an important need, but using places the same way, exactly the same way, without adapting is poor policy. You know, our adaptation is evident even in this room we are sitting right now. You know, we had what some would say a historic council chamber, but the usefulness of that old chamber was not meeting the needs of a broader community, and now we have a more useful and more accessible chambers. Yeah, well, don't get me wrong. I actually like. No, it's not the end. I'm continuing, Jerry. Don't get me wrong. I like the old chambers and I miss it, but I'm aware that it needed to evolve with the times as well. I do think that some portion of this site, a building, as Mr. Cronenberger perhaps said, and maybe the clock tower, should be preserved in some manner to honor that history and that preservation. I do not simply think that just rehabilitating the buildings is the way to go, and I do think that a redevelopment is the best for our entire community. And I think that staff has mentioned in the presentation, a lot of those ideas are going to be taken into account, hopefully. And we don't know. We're going to move forward. This is not going to, change overnight here. But I would like to see a mixed-use site, one that has more housing that is currently available, one that has a true town square that opens up Geneva Lodge and Geneva Park to the community. Is what this site eventually becomes, and that's why I will support this motion to direct staff to continue down that redevelopment path. Anything else, council? All right, well, we have a motion and a second to direct staff to move down the redevelopment path. I'm going to open the voting.
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Grove voting no. The motion carries.
All right, thank you. We have one more item on our agenda tonight here. We have item 10, ordinances on second reading and public hearings. We will have if anyone is going to leave, we can pause briefly here. If anyone's going to stick around for the mineral bid. We'll have a brief staff presentation.
I'll just mention we only got 30 minutes.
I don't think this will take 30 minutes, but if
Yeah,
it gets there, we need to have a action to go past 10 o'clock. No, Keith's not presenting, so. Have staff provide a brief presentation, and then council can ask questions. We'll have open public hearing on this, and then have a motion and a vote, hopefully before 10, but we'll see.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, actually, the presentation is going to be from the petitioners in this case. So we have Nicole Peekov. She's from the law firm of Spencer Fain, as well as Grant Nelson, who is the property owner of this proposed business improvement district. So back in June of this year, the petitioners, per state law, filed a petition with the city clerk to form a business improvement district within the city of Littleton, and that business improvement district would be called the Mineral Business Improvement District. Specifically, generally where that location would be over where the current existing Lumen site is. And per state law, one of the requirements is filing that petition and then coming before city council to get authority to form that with the courts. So in terms of I'll let the petitioners talk a little bit more about what the purpose of the business improvement district is, but a lot of business improvement districts take varying forms in terms of what their purpose is. A lot of them are formed, for purposes of organizing events. You'll see some for providing security, maintenance of improvements that get established, or in this particular case, to help fund the public improvements that are necessary for this proposed development. And so with that, I will turn it over to Nicole, if you want to come on up here to this podium. And
I think that
let you
counts as a
take it away.
brief staff presentation, like I said.
I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Nicole Pekov with Spencer Fain on behalf of the petitioner for the Mineral Business Improvement District. We are requesting that you approve the organization of the mineral bid and approve the 2023-2024 operating plan and budget. Our presentation tonight will summarize the key provisions of the operating plan and go over some details of the project. As the city attorney mentioned, the project is located at the Lumen site at 700 West Mineral Avenue. This is northwest of Highway 85 and 470. This is an underutilized and semi-abandoned industrial site. We're actually pretty excited about this project because it will bring much-needed retail development to the city. The developer is in discussions with several large national retailers to develop the commercial component of the project, along with some smaller retail and restaurant users. Here's the district boundary map. As you can see, there's a lot of words on this map, but it's approximately 46 acres, and there is a portion of the project that's on the southern side that is proposed to consist of multifamily development. We are not, that's not part of our request this evening, and what I'll discuss in the next slide, only commercial development is allowed to be within the boundaries of a bid. The overall mineral project will consist of mixed use, most likely. That'll be retail, commercial, and residential. However, the BID or bid will support just phase 1 of the mineral project, and that consists of approximately 400,000 square feet of commercial development. And as I mentioned, residential property is not allowed under statute to be located within the bid's boundaries. So the bid will not be serving the residential component of this project if it does occur in that fashion. As the site is in an abandoned and semi-abandoned condition, substantial investment will be needed in project infrastructure to redevelop the property. This includes demolition of the site and current buildings, major water, sewer, and master storm sewer infrastructure. Also, there'll be detention pond with retaining walls that will be needed, street and roadway improvements, traffic and safety control improvements, and then landscaping. We estimate that the total costs of the public infrastructure that is needed to redevelop this site is approximately $15,200,000. Following the redevelopment of the site, the bid is expected or anticipated to maintain the public improvements that are not otherwise dedicated to the city or another entity. This could entail providing services such as snow removal, landscaping, and other streetscape maintenance for all the properties within the BID's boundaries, and that would be on an ongoing basis.
Can I interrupt you? Just have a quick question while you have this slide up here.
Of course.
So the 15 million is not what it costs to develop the site, it's to basically get it ready for development. Is that accurate?
The 15 million is for a large part of it is for the demolition, and the rest of it is, well, including the demolition, is also the public infrastructure that is needed. So none of the vertical development, just the horizontal development.
And I guess I would add to that, in terms of what is considered for that site, there will have to be some substantial improvements to the infrastructure, including water and sewer, to support the types of uses that are envisioned for that property over the previous industrial uses.
Right, what I was getting at is, that's just to basically get it ready to be able to be, flattened out and used future if there's no water, they have to put it there and sewer and things like that, so.
Yeah, not to speak for the developer, but this is really probably going to get all the underlying things remediated on the property and not necessarily to build a structure out of that.
Right, I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. And the next two slides might help give you an image of what we're talking about and why those costs are so high. You can see that's the blue outline is some of the above ground detention infrastructure that will be needed and the internal roads running through. The water and sewer infrastructure, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but that's shown on there as well. And these particular slides are also part of your packet if you want to see it in more detail. And here's another similar map that shows the underground detention. Okay, bids function similar to special districts in that they have access to public financing tools such as tax-exempt municipal bonds. And those are used to help finance public infrastructure at a lower cost that would otherwise be available. We anticipate the mineral bid will issue bonds in the next year. And under the operating plan that we have, that we're requesting approval, the mineral BID will have a maximum debt authorization limit of $20 million. We do not anticipate that bond issuance next year to reach that amount. If it were to reach that amount, we would have to come back to City Council and ask for a higher debt limit, but we can get to that a little bit more in the presentation. And also, like special districts, bids have taxing authority within their boundaries and will use and are able to use that revenue that they receive from property taxes to pay for the bonds and to pay for the ongoing operations and administrative services of the district. Under this particular operating plan, the mineral bid will have a taxing mill levy authority of 50 mills for both debt service and operations and maintenance. The next two slides are a summary of the similarities and differences of bids and metro districts or special districts. I won't go through all of these. There are a lot of similarities. Some of the key differences to note are the services that bids can provide. They do have the authority to provide additional services that metro district or special districts are not allowed to provide. And what's important for bids, they contain commercial development, so one of the services that bids can provide are business development services and marketing for those businesses that are within their boundaries. Another power that bids have that Metro District or some special districts do not have is the ability to assess costs and use that revenue for bonding purposes. There are several benefits to utilizing a bid. For this project, we believe a bid is most suitable given that only commercial retail development will occur in the first phase of the project. Bid voters consist of lessees and property owners, and it's typically a limited number. And under the statute, the bid does have to hold elections for the directors. Typically, there are at the request of the petitioners, what the petitioners could ask for the city council to approve is to appoint the board directors or have the city council serve as the board directors. In this case, and in most situations that we handle, the board members are elected officials, and those would consist of the property owners or lessees within the bid's boundaries. So under statute, the bid has to hold a regular election, just as any other jurisdiction, governmental entity has to do. Kind of what I mentioned earlier, the city does have oversight of the bid, more oversight than it would of a metropolitan district or special district, because every year the bid has to submit an operating plan and proposed budget for the city council's review and approval. This is done by September 30th of every year. And at that time, the city has the ability to ask questions, request changes, and make sure that the development is occurring and the property is being maintained to the city's standards. In addition, the bid encourages commercial investment in the city because of the opportunities that are given under the, if a bid is created. And among that is significantly lowering the cost of financing the public infrastructure for that project. Listed on this slide are the conditions for approving our request for both the formation of the bid and the operating plan and budget. We believe our request meets the statutory requirements, so we ask that you approve the formation of the mineral bid and the 2023-2024 operating plan and budget. Grant Nelson from Republic Development is also here if you have any questions, and I'm also available to answer questions. Thank you.
Council, any questions? Councilmember Grove.
Until you have commercial tenants, who's on the board?
It would be representatives of the developer, typically.
And how long does that last before you have to have elections?
The elections would have to start immediately. The first election would be May 2025, when the
Regardless
next
of how
regular
many
election.
tenants you had that would be eligible?
Correct.
And second thing, if you couldn't raise money for the infrastructure via a bid, what are your options?
I'll have the developer answer this question if I am not answering it fully, but typically in that situation, developers will have to rely on construction loans. And those interest rates that are available are not as favorable as what tax-exempt municipal bond will allow. And so ultimately, that just leads into the higher infrastructure costs.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Council? I just had one quick question with the finances. I believe as one citizen said a couple weeks ago, that the city might be on the hook financially, or residents might be on the hook financially for this. Is that the case at all?
That is not the case. Only the property owners within the boundaries of the district would be subject to the taxes of the district.
Okay, great, thanks. Any other questions? Seeing no questions, as this is an ordinance, thank you so much. As this is an ordinance on second reading, we've got open the public comment portion at 9:45. Got a handful of people signed up. Let's see, Mr. McCall.
Yes, I've not seen, in regard to this development, any sort of traffic analysis of Mineral from Broadway to Santa Fe. We have other developments currently under progress, such as the Ensor property, talk of O'Toole's coming in. Of course, we've got the kind of failed attempt with Littleton Village, where it was said to be retail originally, and now the owner has switched it to an apartment building, which is affecting the views of your constituents that purchased in Littleton Village after the fact. So when the developers asked, sure, they're on the hook, but also they have the right to create more districts, change what's going to be there. The citizens have no idea what is going to be there. That's my comments.
Thank you. Next up, Pat Donahue.
Good evening. Back up here again to talk about South Park. Pat Donahue, 1600 West Mineral. This obviously, as you guys know, is really important to me. Crucial opportunity here, crucial change for Littleton that the Board of Directors at South Park, as you guys know, I'm a volunteer on. I've volunteered on it for 20 years now. I've known Grant. He sold me a piece of property, my first piece of property in South Park 25 years ago. This is to South Park and to me, the most exciting thing that we can be talking about right now. That property at South Park, we had a party at a board meeting when we heard that CenturyLink was going to finally be gone. That is the ugliest eyesore in the city of Littleton. It was an old Gates Rubber Company plant that has just absolutely done nothing for anybody. It is just tremendous what's happening. So maybe we go home a little happier tonight because the first part of your night has not been very fun. And this should really be fun. This will really be good stuff. We're really excited about it. South Park, as you know, started as a metro district. Originally, 40 years ago, approximately 40, these are biker numbers, 40 years, we did a metro district and timed it out about 10 years ago, 30 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago. About 20 years ago, we did another one. We came back to the city and said, we have to do an interior one, which includes Mission Hills Church, Denver Cardiology, the Ice Ranch, and that area there is about the same size as this property that Grant's doing is. And we did a second district, and we used the same lawyers that they're using to do both these districts. One that's daylighted, the other one that's still alive that I believe will be terming out within 2 years. So I think you're in great hands. I really encourage you to vote yes on this special district. We want this to be the best project. We want them to have all the necessary financing and the power that they can have to create the very best project in Littleton that we can. So in any help that I can be to Grant, I want to be, and any questions that I can answer to anybody in regards to the districts, please feel free to get a hold of me. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, John Marchetti. Nope, does not want to speak. Next up, Cheryl Espinoza.
I'm Cheryl Espinoza. I live in the 3rd District, and I'm in opposition of this bid, the Mineral Business District Improvement District. And my main concern, as Councilwoman Grove said, is the composition of the Board of Directors. Some of this is based on state statute. As your city attorney will tell you, the composition is based in state statute when a bid is developed. The petitioners have to be persons who own property in the proposed district having a valuation of not less than 50%. There are 5 men who will go on as the initial board of directors for this mineral bid project. The way the ordinance is written and by state statute, the only way to be a member of the Mineral Business Improvement District is to own property in the district in this 46 acres and to own not less than 50% of the valuation. I do not understand what checks and balances there are for the city of Littleton to provide input into the Mineral Business Improvement District. The city council has a generational opportunity to thoughtfully develop this 46 acres into a mixed housing and mixed commercial use area. This is one of the last large land areas that you will have an impact on. And I think that a special district, and I saw your comparison from a special district and that of a bid, I think a special districts allow you to elect people that are not, or have officers that are not living or own property in a district, I'm not for sure. But in a bid, you must own property in that district, which would only be 5 people who own not less than 50%. So I am asking that you either delay a vote on this for consideration or vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then last up, signed up is Rebecca Cast. I think she left. Is there anybody else that would wish to speak? Mike's yours, ma'am.
Did you sign up?
Pam Chapter, I'm a block and a half from here, so I agree with Mr. McCall and Ms. Espinoza. Some issues with this are the city's new zoning map and a code doesn't give us the opportunity to understand what the development of the entire site is. We used to have, under our previous code, planned development overlays in which we understood the entire plan for the entire site. And at that point, the city could understand the impact on all of Mineral, as Mr. McCall pointed out. But now we're at the mercy of whatever happens here. The city has no control, not even insight, over what happens. And that's a bad plan. It's poor on the city's behalf to not understand what the impacts are and then to allow this to occur. The excitement about developing this property is interesting because you wonder how long that's going to last. If the traffic on Mineral becomes congested, I think it'll make the area less desirable. And that's only going to boomerang because, as I think Mr. McCall pointed out, there's going to be more development on Mineral. The new code incentivizes that. And so the city doesn't understand the impact here. It's pretty much going to be negative about traffic. And so, and as Ms. Espinoza pointed out, the folks on the board, the bid, are all owners. There's nobody from outside to be able to even know what's going on. Let me point out also that this is not the last bid you're going to hear about. There's going to be redevelopment elsewhere. So how many special districts are we going to wind up with in Littleton, and what kind of oversight are we going to have? And statistically, are they all going to work? Are some of them going to fail? We don't have insight into what's going on. We can't see or control what's happening. Special districts in Colorado have boomed over the past couple of decades, and there have been some spectacular failures. And this is not the last one. I am concerned about the city's complete blindness in making approvals like this. As a citizen who believes in citizen oversight, we should be able to attend these boards. I think in some cases we can, so we can watch. But I'm going to tell you, attending just the city meetings is a full-time job. Then there's South Metro Housing Options, Parks and Rec, LPS, and now all these bids. There's too much to watch. The city really needs more control over this kind of stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Chabwar. Is there anybody else that wish to speak? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public comment at 9:56. Council, any question? Councilmember Grove.
Okay, I'm confused. In the packet, it says electors for, possible electors for the board are property owners, leaseholders, or individual designated by corporate entity. We heard from some of our citizens that it can't be anybody but a property owner. So which is it?
So if it were, so it can be leaseholders. It can be representatives from, if it's a corporate entity that is the ownership, it can be those representatives. It can't be someone from a residential area. They're not going to be part of the district.
Well, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, who says whether it's a property owner, which is only the 5 developers or the 5 people that own property, or a tenant or a leasing?
State law prescribes who is a registered elector in the district that votes for who these persons are.
Okay, so it could be a tenant. So it doesn't have to be a property owner.
It could be a lessor, a property, yes.
Okay, and then what kind of guardrails are there on some of the problems we've seen in other special districts? I think of Littleton Village, top of mind, but we read about them, and we put some of those guardrails in our metro district ordinance to make sure abuses didn't happen. What do you think about what kind of guardrails the state has, and do we need more to protect the people that end up there.
Yeah, I would say obviously probably one of the most fundamental guardrails would be the approval, the annual approval of their operating report and budget every year, which, yeah, September 30th of every year they have to come forward. I mean, the city's had 2 other business improvement districts that are currently operating. One is the Highline Business Improvement District, which is kind of to the south of South Park. And the other one being Aspen Grove, which is another business improvement district. Annually, they provide a report to City Council, and we can certainly have a presentation in terms of what their plans are, what they're doing with those monies, what their budget looks like, and that's something that our City Council has to approve. You know, how this contrasts a little bit with Littleton Village is Littleton Village, in terms of that entire build-out, was very much kind of dependent on that commercial aspect coming through. And some of those burdens, as some of the residents have found, have been, you know, and in certain cases, uncompleted projects, uncompleted roads, the assessments being passed along to some of the residents within Littleton Village, failing roads, and having to deal with that. For my understanding of the business improvement district, obviously the boundaries of that district are not residential. So they don't have the residential component. The residential component is not reliant upon the commercial actually being successful to fund those other improvements that are going to be associated with the residential component of this. And so I think that's probably a pretty big difference between the two, is that with the Littleton Village, all 3 of those metro districts were very much intertwined and needed to be successful, all of them, for the residential to also be successful. In this particular one, we're just really dealing with a site, and not necessarily the hope that a developer will come in or a commercial use will come in to support that.
Can I call a point of order?
Councilmember Valdez.
Thanks. I'd like to continue this meeting tonight past 2200. Our policy or our rules of council say that we usually stop at 10, so I'd like to continue past 2200.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to continue past 10 o'clock. Any discussion, council? Open voting here somewhere?
Will there be snacks?
No, no snacks.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Councilmember Grove, do you have any further questions?
Yes. Okay, so we see this operating budget that's big and long. How do we know if there's red flags? What kind of red flags would indicate something that we would, and then what is our recourse? What kind of corrective action, or we could just not approve the budget, and then where do we go from there? What would happen?
I'd ask Nicole to come up here and explain if that has happened in the past, but I would assume, yeah, that would be a remedy in terms of the approval of the operating plan and budget. If there were certain questions related to what was going on with that budget, what services were being provided, those queries could be made by City Council and that not approved. And so they would have to go back to their board and kind of fine tune that presentation and come back to City Council. That would be my understanding as to how it would work.
So this is where I'm going with this. If things don't go according to plan, or there's issues maybe filling the tenant space, we could, like Littleton Village, let's say improvements aren't made and tenants don't come, and then there might be higher rents for the remaining tenants, and there could be problems. If there are those kinds of problems, what kind of recourse is there? I mean, we don't want that to happen. I just think having people that own the property start out as the board, it could be incestuous, and it could be to the benefit of the property owners as opposed to the current or potential tenants that would go in there.
Right, so in terms of the question, if we go through, form the bid, they issue bonds, and no commercial tenants arrive, and they're saddled with a property that cost X to actually acquire and Y to actually get into a developable state. What happens? I mean, I'm sure there's some risk to that. I'm sure Mr. Nelson doesn't like thinking about those types of things. But theoretically, there would be concerns about a property owner coming in to a project that was never finished, and what they may have to take on in order to acquire that property. But I would leave that to the savviness of the developer in this case, and having a pretty good idea that he has commercial tenants lined up prior to undertaking a build like that.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? I'll ask one, I guess. I don't know if it's for Grant or city attorney. Is there anyone that could be on the board right now other than the property owners? I mean, I don't see any other options, is there?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Right now, Lumen still owns the property. So we're just authorizing the BID to be formed so that when we do acquire the property, we are able to operate the BID.
But there are no other property
There are
owners
no
or no
other
other individuals that could be on the board at that point?
Exactly.
Okay,
Well,
that's, yeah.
And to answer one of your questions maybe, and one of the questions that came up, in commercial, we disclose all of this upfront. They're much more sophisticated buyers within the commercial space. You know, I have a BID right now in northern Colorado. We're negotiating about 12 different purchase agreements right now, and we disclose it in the purchase agreement. They review the operating plan, they review our plan. It's well known what is operating on the BID. So the buyers, when they come in, or the lessors, know what they're getting into. So it's much more eyes wide open than a home buyer buying a house and then going, why do I have all these mills? These commercial owners are very sophisticated. Our plan is maxed at 50. Our initial plan is only to do 25 mills. And then the operational mills will be low as well because we're trying to keep it as low as possible. The whole idea with the BID is to issue bonds so you can spread that cost over 25 years. 25-year financing is a lot easier to amortize this. It's the same reason home mortgages are over 30 years. It spreads the payments over a longer period of time, which brings down the cost. If you have a 3-year loan, it's very expensive. A 25-year loan or a 25-year bond offering, as it may be, just allows for the cost to be spread, same as a mortgage. Sorry, I've stopped repeating myself. But in the second half of it is, we oftentimes have trouble getting anyone to want to be on these boards. The corporate, a national retailer could designate someone, they just don't. And so their corporate attorneys monitor us. The leases or the purchase agreements, the operating agreements that we have in place allow for that oversight that you were asking about. That is the concern. So I know they're not maybe some of the questions you answered, but I want to make sure you see it as fully as possible. So.
Just for a point of clarification, do you get a lower interest rate on the loan, or you just get a longer term that makes it cheaper?
Longer term, and in today's capital markets, the interest rates on these bonds are pretty high in comparison to the last 15 years. So
it's just a longer amortization
it's just
period.
a longer amortization, yeah. And they'll package it up and they'll take it out to the market and find the best interest rates that are possible. But it's just a longer period of time. So you're welcome.
Any other questions, council? No
Yeah,
questions.
I guess I do want to clarify one of the questions that came in from Ms. Espinoza regarding this 50%. So the 50% was for the establishment of a business improvement district, that you had to have 50% of the valuation of that district, if you will, to come forward and petition the city to form that. So
that's
just a little
like a
nuance.
minority owner couldn't overpower and form a bid over.
Correct. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's this district that's going to be deciding whether or not to impose taxes on themselves, on their own properties. Much like kind of some of the considerations you saw with the DDA and who was responsible and who were registered electors for that, although that was more expansive than a business improvement district. But so just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you.
Mayor, I approve, or I make a motion to approve ordinance 19-2023, an ordinance on second reading organizing the Mineral Business Improvement District, providing for an election of the Board of Directors and approving the 2023-2024 operating budget or operating plan and budget for the district.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve ordinance 19 on second reading. Council, any discussion or comments? Seeing none. Open the vote.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. And with no further items on the agenda, we are adjourned at 10:08.